but we identified them quickly and sent them away. There's no need for you to worry. The people of White Harbor may worship the Seven, but we've developed a culture intertwined with the old gods over thousands of years." Ned nodded, recalling that the September of White Harbor was built right next to the Heart Tree, deeply integrated with the sacred forest. "All right," he said finally, "I'm sure you're already aware of this, but aside from the priests of the septs in Winterfell and White Harbor, it is forbidden for any of the Seven's priests to stay or preach in the north for long." The Winterfell September was seldom used, except by Ashura and her daughters Illyria and Sansa. Ned had built it for his late wife, Catelyn, who had died from childbed fever. Ashura still occasionally visited the September, especially on significant days, but she could hardly be described as a follower of the Seven's teachings. Especially not in bed. "What about Robert? What's he doing?" Ned asked. "King Robert seems to have retreated to Storm's End. He's assembling an army," Wyman reported. "Hoster Tully and Tywin Lannister are doing the same. However, unlike the others who are merely calling on their regular forces, Lord Lannister appears to be mustering his entire Westerlands host." Eddard nodded. No doubt Lord Tywin was smart enough to see that this rebellion needed to be crushed swiftly and decisively. "And Jon Arryn?" he asked. "He seems to have sailed to Old Town," Wyman replied. Ned raised an eyebrow. Both the king and the Hand were absent from King's Landing, a situation that could create serious issues. However, he understood why his foster father had sailed south. Jon must be seeking counsel with the most devout in Old Town, likely to gain formal approval from the faith's official institutions for any action against the High Sparrow and his followers. It was the prudent course of action. But then, a troubling realization struck him. Wait a moment. Does this mean Cersei Lannister is currently in charge of both the Red Keep and King's Landing? Gods have mercy on us. "I see," Ned said at last. "If you'll excuse me, I'll need some time to think. We'll discuss Sansa's wardship tomorrow." Wyman Mandaeally gave a silent nod and left the room, leaving Eddard alone with a map of Westeros. As he studied the map, Eddard deliberated on his next move. Should he gather an army and march south? He could use his alliance with the Tullys as an excuse, even if Hoster claimed he didn't need aid, and personally deal with the High Sparrow's uprising. But he quickly dismissed the thought. Starting a new conflict between the followers of the old gods and the Seven would only sow discontent that might haunt his son Robb and future generations. He sighed as his gaze shifted to Moat Cailin. Despite his years of efforts to strengthen the north, he had done little to restore the ancient castle. But why should he? King Robert was a friend of the north, he would never attack them, and even if he did, the castle in its ruined state could repel any invasion from the south. Still, Ned's instincts were gnawing at him, raising alarms he couldn't ignore. The events in the south weren't as straightforward as they appeared. The High Sparrow had gained significant popularity among the common folk even before the rebellion began, with some hailing him as the future High Septon. Yet, the speed at which houses around Stony September rallied to his cause seemed unusual, too well organized, too meticulously planned. "A voice in my head tells me more houses, especially those in the Reach, will soon declare their support for the High Sparrow," Ned thought as he scrutinized the map. For now, the only action he decided on was to station 1,000 Stark soldiers at Moat Cailin. He also resolved to begin plans for the fortress's restoration. Shifting his focus to the map of the north, he considered his other plans. A new port was needed on the eastern coastline, and Ned would have to choose between granting the project to House Locke or House Flint. Ramsgate was also a suitable option, but it was already under the management of a vassal house sworn to the Mandaelis. His primary reason for coming to White Harbor had been to discuss this matter with Wyman, as well as Sansa's wardship. There was also the matter of Sisterton, though Ned had decided to postpone it for now. When Ned had mentioned his plans for Sisterton to Ashura, her reaction had been far from pleasant. "Go outside and ride," Eddard Stark she had shouted. "Ride in any direction, without stopping for 2 weeks, and you still wouldn't leave the north. But you want more land." Ned couldn't help but sigh. Ashura didn't understand, Sisterton was no mere land. It was the critical gateway to the north, and Ned couldn't afford to ignore that. "It seems I'll be staying in this city longer than I expected," Ned decided. "I should write to Ashura and Benjen." Ned took the paper and ink and began to write Ashura's letter. But just as he was about to write, he saw someone barging through the door. It wasn't hard to recognize the man, he was a perfect copy of his father. "This is insolence," he said, glaring at Wendell Mondaly with furrowed brows. "My lord, please forgive me," the young man said hurriedly, extending the letter in his hand. "But you must read this immediately. The letter just arrived." Ned looked at the man in front of him with a stern expression, but couldn't help but wonder what had him so worried. He took the letter from the man's hand. He opened the letter and read it. At first, he wanted to deny what he had read, but at the bottom, there was the royal seal. Eddard Stark sighed as he looked at the man in front of him, took the wine glass in his hand, and, unlike he usually did, filled it to the brim and drank it in one go. "When did this happen?" he asked Wendell Mondaly. "About a week or a week and a half ago, my lord," the young man reported. Ned looked again at the ornate wine glass in his hand, then threw it at the wall. Chapter 19, A Week Ago. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ulfr was an ordinary man. He was born and raised in Flea Bottom, but luckier than most children there. Though his mother died during childbirth, his father was alive and had raised Ulfr, teaching him the family trade, rat hunting. His father had always been proud of their profession. They weren't rich, but they always had enough to eat, and there was always meat and bread on their table. Their family had been doing this work for generations, and Ulfr had even heard that one of their great ancestors had accomplished something extraordinary. His father never gave any details about it, but little Ulfr never tired of hearing the story. His real name was Raymond, but everyone knew him as Cheese. From the most ordinary peasant to the greatest lord, everyone had heard his name. Later, Ulfr learned what his great-grandfather Raymond had actually done and didn't know how to feel about it. The deed was a true atrocity, but it was committed against the Targaryens. The Targaryens were a cruel family, known for insulting the teachings of the Seven with their incestuous marriages, burning people alive, and other heinous acts. Was it truly a crime if it was done to them? Before his father passed away, Ulfr asked him what he thought about it. "I'm dying now, son, from old age," his father said with a grin. "Our ancestor Raymond lived 20 more years despite killing a crown prince, and he died the same way as I will. Now that's an achievement to be proud of." That's when Ulfr realized, his father didn't care whether the person killed was a child or a Targaryen. He was simply honoring the success of his great-grandfather Raymond. What does it matter? Ulfr decided. Don't nobles do the same? They boast of ancestors who won wars by killing and raping thousands. What's the difference between us? After his father's death, Ulfr naturally took over the family business. To be honest, he was quite good at it. But his work wasn't limited to rat catching. His great-grandfather Raymond knew the tunnels beneath the Red Keep as well as the back of his hand, and he passed this knowledge down to his children. Even so, Ulfr didn't use this knowledge much, just for small jobs. Stealing some supplies from inside or spying on minor nobles were simple tasks that earned enough to feed Ulfr and his sons. There was no need to take bigger risks for larger rewards. But this time, Ulfr accepted the offer presented to him, not for money, but for something else entirely. "Turn right up ahead," he instructed the men following behind him. "The path will get tight, damp, and slippery, but it won't last long. After that, turn right again, climb a vertical ladder, and you'll come to a dragon sigil dial. Turn it left twice and right once, and the Queen's chamber door will open for you. I'll wait here." The two men nodded silently, their foreheads branded with the 7-point star, a fiery seal. "Thank you for your help, brother Ulfr," said the lean man with two swords at his waist, his voice gracious. "We'll make sure the High Sparrow is informed of your great assistance." "No need," Ulfr replied with a dismissive wave. "Just, make her suffer." The two men neither confirmed nor denied his request. They simply began to follow the path Ulfr had shown them in silence. As Ulfr watched them go, he prayed for their success. The Lannisters had slaughtered his loved ones and friends cruelly during the sack of King's Landing. Later, they seized control of the city after the king and Hand departed, oppressing both the common folk and the devout. They were no different from the Targaryens and deserved the same treatment. Ulfr waited, and waited. But the men hadn't returned for a long time, and waiting any longer could be risky, so he started packing his bag to leave. But at that moment, he noticed someone had appeared behind him. Arthur quickly turned around, but stopped when he saw the fat, bald man. "Ah, so that's why I didn't hear any footsteps," he thought to himself. "Lord Varys," he said, bowing respectfully. "I didn't expect to see you here." "The feeling is mutual," Arthur the spymaster said in his usual mocking tone. "You've never taken big jobs before. What made you accept this one?" Arthur sighed, knowing there was no point in lying to this man. "The Lannisters, those bastards killed my son. If you mean to kill me, Lord Varys, so be it. But please, don't harm my children." "Kill you?" Varys raised his eyebrows. "That thought never even crossed my mind. You know, I learned about the Red Keep's secret tunnels from your grandfather, so I have a certain fondness for your family. But Arthur hesitated. "I helped assassinate members of the royal family." "Oh, the ones inside," Varys said with an amused tone. "That's not what was inside, dear friend Arthur. To be honest, what happened even shocked me. Come, it's getting dangerous if we stay here any longer. I'll explain on the way." Arthur followed Varys without a word. He didn't fear the spymaster. If Varys wanted him dead, he had plenty of ways to do it. Lying to Arthur wasn't necessary. "What happened in there?" he asked, curiosity getting the better of him. "Your men entered the Queen's chambers," Varys began, "and found Queen Cersei, with her brother Jaime." Arthur stared at the pudgy man, sensing there was more to his words. "I see," he said eventually. "I've heard of Sir Jaime's legendary swordsmanship. He probably cut them down easily." "Oh, but that's not quite how it went," Varys said with a grin. "You're right, Sir Jaime could have dealt with them effortless, if he'd had a sword and if he hadn't been naked." Arthur blinked at Varys, needing a moment to process the implications of his words. "Incest. Disgusting. I was right all along, there's no difference between the Targaryens and the Lannisters." "And then," he prompted. "Apparently, Sir Jaime heroically stepped forward to protect his sister," Varys continued. "Your men didn't have much trouble cutting down an unarmed, naked man." Queen Cersei screamed so loudly after watching her brother die that the entire Red Keep heard it. "Even I heard it from my chambers. I did hear some muffled shouting earlier," Arthur admitted. "That explains it." "Indeed." Once the Queen's cries were heard, all the guards nearby rushed to her chambers, a few Lannister soldiers, some gold cloaks, and Sir Barristan Selmy himself. "Did they see all of it?" Arthur laughed this time. "It must have been quite a sight." "It truly was," Varys confirmed, his tone gleeful. The naked corpse of Sir Jaime on the floor, Queen Cersei lying on the bed, also naked, with her legs wet. "And, as I'm sure you guessed, the two men you brought were killed on the spot." "I wish I'd been there," Arthur said with a genuine laugh. "I'd probably be dead too, but it would have been worth it to see that scene." Their laughter echoed through the secret tunnels of the Red Keep. "What happened next?" Arthur asked. "Sir Barristan Selmy demanded the Queen's arrest." "Naturally, she resisted," Varys explained. "Now the King's men and Lannister soldiers are fighting within the castle. Even the gold cloaks are divided between those loyal to the King and those loyal to the Lannisters. So a war is about to begin." "Yes, it seems so," Varys replied. "Just like your ancestor Cheese Raymond, you've lit the fuse for a war. Do you feel guilty?" "Not really," Arthur shrugged. "The lords of Westeros are always looking for an excuse to slaughter each other. Even if it weren't me, they'd have found another reason to fight." The two men continued through the tunnels for several more minutes. "You're taking me to the harbor. May I ask why?" Arthur inquired. "You've started taking on bigger jobs, and I have one lined up for you," Varys replied. Arthur looked at the spymaster and realized this wasn't a request. He had no choice but to accept. "What about my family?" he asked. "They'll join you aboard your ship in half an hour. Then you'll set sail," Varys said, handing him a large pouch of gold. "Here, consider this your advance payment." Arthur said nothing. He simply climbed out of the tunnel hatch and emerged near the harbor, where a ship awaited, ready to sail. "What do I need to do?" he asked the man behind him. "You'll find out on the way," Varys replied. And where am I going? Tiosh. Alpha glanced at the spymaster, then at the ship in the harbor, and finally at the pouch of gold in his hand. In that moment, he understood. Alpha was no longer an ordinary man. Notes. For those still confused, the letter Ned read in the previous chapter was describing the events of this chapter. Yes, some very interesting things are going to happen in the future. Chapter 20, Jon Arryn. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Jon Arryn looked at the letter in his hand. Then, he looked at the courier standing before him. Then, he looked back at the letter. And again at the courier. For a moment, the old man just sat there, as if staring long enough might somehow make the absurdity vanish. What in the name of the seven is going on, he muttered. In his 65 years of life, Jon Arryn had weathered wars, political schemes, and royal tantrums, but never before had he been this thoroughly shocked. Still, ever the cautious and pragmatic man, he inspected the letter again, focusing on the unmistakable seal stamped at the bottom. He turned it over in his hands, inspecting the parchment for any sign of forgery, though he already knew it was authentic. The seal, the handwriting, it all matched perfectly. If this is some kind of jest, Sir Jon said finally, his voice sharp and low, know that it is one that carries severe consequences. The courier, a young knight who seemed visibly uncomfortable, bowed his head. I would never dare such disrespect, my lord. I swear on my honor that everything written in that letter is true. Jon Arryn let out a slow, shaky breath and pinched the bridge of his nose. Incest. Depravity. Betrayal. And wait, if this letter is correct, it means the heirs to the Iron Throne are bastards, born of incest. His hand dropped to the desk. Bastards. The word echoed in his mind, heavy with the weight of the revelation. Bloody hell. I'm too old for this. Without another word, Jon reached for his wine goblet, filled it to the brim, and drained it in a single swallow. He stared at the empty glass for a moment, as if contemplating whether another would help, then set it down with a thud. I was gone for 2 weeks, he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. 2 bloody weeks, sailing for Old Town, and now Westeros is teetering on the edge of a civil war. After a moment, he looked up, his pale blue eyes sharp and calculating. When did this happen? 1 week ago, my lord, the courier replied. And what is the state of King's Landing? Sir Barristan Selmy has managed to maintain order, the knight began, speaking with measured respect. He dealt with the Lannister-aligned gold cloaks swiftly, ensuring no further unrest. Jon nodded slowly. Leaving Barristan behind had been the right choice. Normally, the old knight should have been by Robert's side, serving as his personal guard. But Jon had insisted that Barristan remain in the Red Keep. Someone needed to keep an eye on the Queen, especially with both himself and Robert absent. If Barristan hadn't been there, Jon didn't want to imagine the chaos that might have unfolded. And the Queen. Her children. The courier hesitated for a moment, as if the news pained him. The commander of the Lannister forces in King's Landing proved to be exceptionally capable. He managed to rally all the Lannister troops stationed in the city and escort the Queen and her children out. By now, they've likely reached Casterly Rock. Jon swore under his breath. That was disastrous news. If they had managed to capture Cersei and her children, they could have used them as bargaining chips, a powerful leverage against Tywin Lannister. But now, war was inevitable. And after that? Jon asked, his voice grim. Sir Barristan's first action after securing the city was to write letters, to King Robert, to yourself, and to Lord Stark. He detailed the events and sent them with trusted couriers. Concerned that his claims might be dismissed as absurd or a cruel jest, he took the liberty of sealing the letters with the royal sigil, even though he lacks the authority to do so. Sir Barristan did what was necessary, Jon said with a dismissive wave of his hand. No one will hold that against him. He paused, tapping his fingers on the desk. Has there been any word on how the warriors of the Seven managed to enter the Queen's chambers? When I left, Lord Varys was still investigating the matter, my lord. I see, Sir Jon said. Thank you for your service. You will be rewarded in due time. The knight nodded, bowed deeply once more, and left the room. Jon sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the parchment on his desk. Finally, he let out a deep sigh, reached for his quill and ink, and began drafting his first orders. Being in Old Town at this time, John realized, was a stroke of luck. He was scheduled to meet with the most devout in 2 days. Originally, the meeting was meant to address the High Sparrow and the growing rebellion he'd incited. But now, the fanatics and their rabid followers seemed almost laughably insignificant. The Seven only knew what kind of chaos awaited him in King's Landing. "My lord, there is news that requires your attention," said Nestor Royce as he entered the room. John Arryn sighed deeply as he looked at his loyal steward. The past few weeks had been nothing short of overwhelming. He had met with the most devout council and informed them about the sins of the former Queen Cersei and her children. Soon, the council would officially declare Cersei's children as bastards. John was determined to avoid fighting a war on 2 fronts, against the Lannisters and the zealous fanatics of the faith. That was why a delegation of selected envoys was being prepared to negotiate with the High Sparrow. If the negotiations failed, the most devout would issue an official edict excommunicating the High Sparrow and his followers. "Any news from the Tyrells?" John asked, his voice calm but firm. "They are still assembling their forces at Bitterbridge," replied Nestor. "There hasn't been any significant change." John nodded in acknowledgement. Over the past weeks, he had sent orders to the Reach and Vale lords to muster their armies. Unfortunately, the Lannisters were moving faster. Tywin had already assembled the entire Westerlands host under the guise of quelling the High Sparrow's uprising. Now, they were launching brutal attacks against the Riverlands and the Reach. According to the reports John had read, the atrocities committed in the raided regions were horrifying. He turned his attention to the map of Westeros sprawled across the table. Ned Stark was rallying the northern armies to march to River Run's aid. The Vale forces, led by Yohn Royce, were gathering at the Bloody Gate and preparing to move. Robert Baratheon had only recently completed mustering his forces and had already begun his march toward the Riverlands. John feared Robert's impulsiveness would lead to a hasty decision that could jeopardize the campaign. Hoster Tully, on the other hand, was wisely employing defensive strategies against the Lannisters. As for Doran Martell had refrained from sending official aid, but his brother Oberyn had joined the war with a volunteer force of 5,000 men. The most unexpected aid, however, came from Balon Greyjoy. The Ironborn had taken the opportunity to launch raids along the western coasts. Their navy was still recovering after being decimated by Stannis Baratheon, so their attacks weren't particularly strong. They hadn't captured any castles yet, but they were consistently raiding Lannisport, the Crag, and Banefort. It seemed Balon Greyjoy had finally learned to play the political game. This time, he had attacked under favorable circumstances, ensuring the Ironborn wouldn't be punished for their actions. "Very well," John said at last, pulling his eyes away from the map to meet Nestor's gaze. "What is it?" "My lord, Adam Marbrand, an envoy from the Westerlands, requests an audience with you." John let out a quiet sigh. "Very well," he said as he rose to his feet. "Summon him to the council chamber and ask the other lords to join us for the meeting." "Sir, I would say you're welcome," John said as he regarded the man before him, "but that would be a lie." "I've come on behalf of Lord Tywin," Lord Hand Adam Marbrand said, bowing respectfully. "I am here to provide an explanation for the misunderstanding that occurred at the Red Keep." "Ah, let us hear it then," Westerlander Lord Florent said with a sneer. "Do share your wretched excuses." John cast a sharp look at Florent. The man had been trying to take advantage of the chaos in recent weeks, attempting to legitimize Robert's bastard, Edric Storm, as the king's heir. While John found his ambition grating, there was some truth to Florent's mockery. "If you're here to accuse Sir Barristan of lying," John warned Adam Marbrand coldly, "you'll find that a futile endeavor." "Never," my Lord Marbrand protested quickly, raising his hands. "I would never dishonor Sir Barristan so. He spoke the truth as he saw it, but I fear he misunderstood what transpired." John's gaze hardened. "Explain." "Queen Cersei." Marbrand began. "Former Queen Cersei," Lord Florent corrected, his tone dripping with disdain. Marbrand shot a sharp glare at Lord Florent but continued with his story. "Queen Cersei, tragically, was raped that day by 2 devout fanatics," he said with visible discomfort. "And why was Sir Jaime naked?" Lytton Hightower interjected with a mocking chuckle. Did they rape him as well? Laughter rippled across the room. Even Jon had to steel himself to avoid cracking a smile. The brigands stripped him of his armor and sword after slaying him, Marbrand said, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. A fine tale, Lady Alysanne Bulwer said dryly. And why was Lady Cersei so late in calling for help? Her mouth was gagged throughout the ordeal, my lady, Marbrand replied. Jon sighed as he watched the young man struggle. The story was obviously fabricated, but it was crafted well enough to account for every piece of evidence. I'm sure Lord Tywine doesn't expect us to believe this story and back down, Jon thought. It didn't matter whether the tale was true, false, or absurd. Its mere existence served its purpose. If the Lannisters won the war, this version of events would become the truth. We've heard enough of your excuses, Sir Jon said, waving dismissively. You will soon return to the Westerlands with a message for Lord Tywine. Inform him that former Queen Cersei and her 3 bastards are to be surrendered immediately to King Robert for a fair trial. Lord Tywine must withdraw his forces from the Riverlands and the Reach and pay reparations equal to 4 times the damage inflicted. His armies are to disband at once. If he agrees, there will be peace, and House Lannister will not bear the stain of Cersei's actions. But if he refuses, he will be tried after the war, and House Lannister's position as Lords Paramount of the West will be reconsidered. Jon's voice carried the weight of finality, silencing the room. You may rest here for a few days. After that, you will be escorted back to Casterly Rock. Adam Marbrand opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, 2 Hightower guards seized him by the arms and hauled him out of the chamber. We continue with our war preparations, my lords, Jon declared, rising to his feet. The Lannisters will answer for their crimes soon enough. As Jon left the chamber, the sound of applause and cheers followed him. A faint smile tugged at his lips. But then he saw Lord Nestor Royce approaching, a letter in hand. 7 hells, Jon thought with a weary sigh. This man is my friend, but every time I see him, it's bad news. What happened this time? Jon asked, turning to Nestor Royce. King Robert has hanged Sir Jaime's naked corpse from Maegor's Holdfast for all to see, Royce reported grimly. He also severed his manhood and sent it to Lady Cersei in a box. He said his whore of a wife would recognize the gift. Jon covered his face with his hand. He knew that Tywine Lannister would never tolerate such an insult, but war was already inevitable. He decided to overlook this particular matter. You always bring bad news, Nestor, Jon said with a wry smile. Do you have anything good to report? Royce paused thoughtfully before his face brightened. Ah, yes, something you'll enjoy hearing. Lord Stark has had another child, a daughter named Lytheria Stark. They say she's an exceptionally sweet child. Jon's heart warmed at the news. He was genuinely happy for Ned. Unlike himself, Ned seemed blessed when it came to children. Perhaps the old gods favored the Starks. Jon's thoughts drifted to his late wife, Jane Royce, who had died giving birth to their daughter, Shara. Though the girl had seemed healthy at first, she had succumbed to illness a few months later, leaving Jon in anguish. During the years he raised Ned and Robert in the Eyrie, Jon had come to view them as surrogate sons. Robert had been mischievous and impulsive, but Jon loved him regardless. And Ned? Ned was everything a son should be, honorable, dependable, capable. During those times, Jon realized that he often thought of his late daughter Shara while watching Ned. If she had lived, she would have been around Ned's age. Jon wouldn't have hesitated to marry her to Ned, as it would have allowed Ned to become the Lord of the Vale after Jon. Jon's only condition for the marriage would have been that the husband must take his wife's surname. In traditional marriages, the woman adopts the husband's surname, but in this case, Jon would have insisted on the opposite. After all, Ned couldn't have ruled the Vale under the Stark name, and any children from his marriage to Shara would certainly carry the Arryn name. Still, the idea of merging his own bloodline with Ned's was not just a fantasy. Jon thought about a potential marriage between his son, Robin Arryn, and Sansa, Arya, or even the newly born Lytheria. Robin Arryn's health had not been great, but under the care of Yohn Royce, he was gradually improving. His mother, Lysa, after learning of Petyr Baelish's death and the horrific circumstances of it, had thrown herself out of the Moon Door, leaving Jon to take on the role of both guardian and regent. As the Hand of the King, John couldn't devote as much time to his son as he would have liked. Perhaps he could send young Robin to Winterfell to be raised under Ned's watch. There, the boy would experience real family love, friendship, and eventually meet his future wife. "I'll speak with Ned after the war," John resolved as he entered his chambers. He glanced at the mountain of paperwork on his desk and let out a deep sigh. Truly, I'm too old for this. Notes. The Eddard Stark /Shara Arin pairing that I wrote towards the end of the chapter is one of my new fanfic ideas. Feel free to share your thoughts on it, but also keep in mind that if I start a new series, the chapter flow of this series may not be as active as before. If you enjoyed this fanfic, don't forget to recommend it to a friend and leave a kudos. Chapter 21, Robert Baratheon. Notes. Jon Arryn's son's name was changed to Robin Arryn to avoid comparisons with King Robert. Chapter text. Your Grace, the Hand of the King specifically advised against this course of action, Courtnay Penrose said, attempting one last time to dissuade Robert. "Ah, shut it, Courtnay," Robert barked, waving his hand dismissively. "I've made my decision. Now go and prepare those damned legitimization papers." Courtnay hesitated but eventually relented, leaving the room with Maester Cresson to see the paperwork done. As the door shut behind them, Robert turned his attention to the man before him, Imry Florent, whose wide grin was made all the more absurd by his comically large ears. "You've made a wise decision, Your Grace," Imry said, bowing low in gratitude. "Edric is a boy to be proud of and will serve as an exemplary heir." "A temporary heir," Robert corrected firmly. "The moment I have a son with my new queen, Edric moves to the back of the line. Keep that in mind, Florent. I'm giving him the Baratheon name because the boy's earned it. And Edric had earned it. The boy was undeniably his, Baratheon through and through, except for those ridiculous Florent ears. More importantly, he was everything Robert's brothers weren't. At first, Robert hadn't even considered legitimizing Edric Storm. But with war raging and no true-born heirs of his own, the uncertainty of survival gnawed at him. In theory, Robert already had two heirs, Stannis and Renly. But Stannis was a cold, humorless pedant who could never connect with people. All he ever talked about were laws and technicalities. Renly, on the other hand, was a vain fool, utterly useless in matters of governance or war. At least Stannis had some skill in both, but Renly, he was little more than an entitled brat, and Robert had no patience for his antics. Then there was the matter of Renly's preferences. Robert wasn't blind, his youngest brother was a sword swallower incapable of fathering children and continuing the Baratheon line. Jon will understand, Robert thought. Given the circumstances, Edric is the best option I've got. He's got the blood, the brains, and the strength. The boy's as much a Baratheon as I am, Florent ears be damned. He'll do fine as my heir for now. Courtnay entered the room holding a stack of papers. Robert reviewed the documents carefully. They proclaimed Edric Storm's legitimization but specified that he would remain behind Robert's true-born sons in the line of succession, yet still ahead of his uncles. The papers were divided into 10 copies, some destined for the Lord Paramounts, the Small Council, the Most Devout, and the High Septon. Robert personally signed each document and sealed them with the royal ring. "Take this," he said, handing one of the papers to Imry Florent. "Go to Storm's End, fetch Edric, and bring him to King's Landing. Present these papers to the High Septon and have him legitimized immediately. Afterward, take the boy back to Storm's End. King's Landing isn't safe right now." "As you command, Your Grace," Imry said, his tone oozing with gratitude. He bowed deeply, his ridiculous ears almost flapping with the motion, and hurried out of the room, no doubt thrilled at his family's newfound favor. "Now, Courtnay," Robert said, turning to his cousin. "Let's talk about the war. What's the state of the army?" "We have approximately 22,000 men under arms, Your Grace," Courtnay replied. "As you know, Riverrun remains under siege, and the Northern Army is marching south with nearly 20,000 men." Robert's eyes lit up with excitement. Yes, Ned. Together, they had crushed Dragonspawn and Ironborn. Now it was time for the lions to fall. "Good," Robert muttered, studying the map spread across the table. He may not have been a great king, he left most of the governing to Jon Arryn, but war was where he truly thrived. How many men are defending Harrenhal? He asked, pointing to the castle on the map. The so-called High Sparrow had entrenched himself there, turning it into a fortress of zealotry. Roughly 4,000, Courtney reported. Perfect, Robert said with a wolfish grin. That's where we'll strike first. But, your Majesty, protested his cousin, Aemon Estermont, cursed with a damnable Targaryen name. Lord Arryn sent a delegation to negotiate with them. Call them back, Robert snapped. You don't negotiate with rebels. You crush them. His gaze returned to the map, his finger tracing the path his army would take. Harrenhal was a strong defensive position, and taking it would cost him men, but he didn't care. 6 of the 7 kingdoms were behind him. Soldiers were a resource he could afford to spend. He estimated that his army would reach Harrenhal within a week. The time has come to smash these self-righteous zealots and end their rebellion once and for all. May the stranger have mercy on my soul, the priest murmured one final prayer, just before Robert tore through his chest with his warhammer. Robert gazed at the scene before him. Kingspire Tower. He knew the High Sparrow was inside. Once Robert finished dealing with this fanatic rebellion, he would turn to the real war with the Lannisters. The pious fanatics, despite not knowing how to fight, had put up a good fight. They fought not with skill but with faith, and because of that, they had managed to deal a significant blow to the Baratheon forces attacking Harrenhal. But it was nearly over now. Once Robert ended this rebellion, he would go help Ned, who was attacking the Lannister forces besieging Riverrun. He was in a hurry and didn't want to waste time here. Ah, Ned. How nice it would be to fight beside him again. If only Lyanna were still alive, she would have joined them in battle too. Of course, Robert wouldn't have allowed Lyanna to take a sword in hand and charge into battle, but she could have shot arrows from a safe distance at their enemies. Lyanna. Robert mourned once again for her and the future they never had. To be honest, Lyanna wasn't the most beautiful woman, but she was exactly the woman Robert had wanted. Robert dreamed of the wonderful future he could have had with Lyanna. They would leave the administrative tasks of Storm's End and the absurdities of copper counting to Stannis. They would ride together, hunt together, and when their sons were old enough to rule, Robert would give him the lordship. He would travel Essos with Lyanna, visiting places like Braavos, Myr, Teosh, even Asshai. The two of them would tour the entire continent. Robert was eager to talk to Lyanna about his dreams and plans. During the Harrenhal tournament, he had tried to speak with her, but she had coldly rejected him. He knew that Lyanna likely saw Myr's bastard daughter as evidence that Robert would be an unfaithful husband, but Myr's birth was not a conscious decision. Robert had witnessed the drowning of his parents at Storm's End and had fled to the Eyrie shortly after. He had been angry and stressed, plagued by nightmares every night, and it was during this time that he met Myr's mother. The woman had been eager to comfort him, and Robert had needed something to quiet the nightmares haunting him. If I had told Lyanna, I'm sure she would have understood. I had no intention of disrespecting her. If I had done that, she probably would have castrated me, Robert thought with a chuckle. Robert had planned to meet Lyanna privately on the last day of the tourney and explain everything in his mind, but then that dragon freak, Rhaegar, declared Lyanna the queen of love and beauty, ruining everything. When Robert recalled Rhaegar extending the flower crown to Lyanna, he clenched his fist in anger, remembering how every smile had died that day. The dragon freak had not only disrespected his own wife but had also branded Lyanna with the wolf Hortag. After that fiasco, many of the Storm Lords had advised Robert to call off the betrothal, but Robert had completely ignored them. If Rhaegar hadn't taken her, well, it doesn't matter now. Everything had already happened. Where is that shitbag called the High Sparrow? Robert asked the knight beside him. He's inside the tower, my lord. We've chained him up for you, the knight answered. Good. Robert looked back at his men. Storm Lords. Come with me and bear witness to your king's just judgment. A preview of what I will do to Tywin and his whore daughter Cersei. With the cheers of the Storm Lords echoing in his ears, Robert entered Kingspire Tower, and High Sparrow was brought before him, his arms bound in chains. The so-called High Sparrow, whatever the hell his name is, Robert dismissed the formalities. You're being tried for plotting rebellion against your king and for treason. What is your response to the charges? Heh, Ned would be proud if he saw me now. High Sparrow lifted his head and looked at Robert. Your Majesty, he said calmly but resolutely, I have merely carried out the will of the seven. Your kingdom has become corrupt, stained with immorality, and has strayed from the light of our faith. Even you, with your sins, have defiled the sacred lands. This is not rebellion, this is purification. Robert laughed angrily. You call this purification? He struck the ground with his warhammer for emphasis. Hiding behind the walls of Harrenhal, inciting my lords to treason, and terrorizing the Blackwood people who worship the old gods. Is this the will of the seven? High Sparrow lowered his head, as if listening to the confession of a sinner. Those who do not see the light of the seven must inevitably suffer, Your Majesty. This is the price for their salvation. Enough! Robert shouted, reaching the end of his patience. There is no need for a trial. Your crimes are crystal clear. I'll end this nonsense by smashing your skull with my hammer, and then I'll get back to my real wars. The High Sparrow took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and raised his head toward the sky. May the stranger have mercy on my soul, and I pray that he shows mercy on yours as well, he murmured. These were his last words before Robert lifted his warhammer and brought it down upon his chest. Robert thought, this matter is closed, as he returned his warhammer to his belt, turning around amidst the cheers. Now, I need to go help Ned. At that very moment, an explosion shook the tower. The entire castle was violently rattled. Robert's feet were firmly planted, but suddenly he felt like the world was slipping away beneath him. A low hum rose from deep in the earth, a chilling silence that followed a storm's warning, signaling that something was terribly wrong with the world. He quickly lifted his head, and the storm lords and soldiers around him looked at the ground in confusion. It felt as though the whole world was collapsing all at once. A sense of fear settled in Robert's chest, building up inside him, but then he felt another shockwave, one that seemed to emanate from deep within the tower itself. The ground trembled, the wind shifted abruptly, and everything felt hollow, as if the very core of reality had shifted. His eyes, suddenly sharp, focused on the ground beneath Kingspire Tower, sensing something stirring within it. He could feel something spreading fast. But, what was it? And then, a second later, the explosion hit. At first, just a flash, a burst of light, but then everything changed, as if time itself had slowed down. The flash felt like a harbinger of the end, and green flames rose around Robert. That's when he understood what was happening. Wildfire. How had these fanatical bastards gotten their hands on wildfire? A green light flared in the air, and suddenly everything transformed into hell. As Robert desperately looked around, the flames consumed every inch of his body. Strangely, he didn't feel any pain, despite the fire enveloping him. As the tower's stone walls cracked and Kingspire began to collapse above him, Robert realized his inevitable end was near. But oddly, he didn't feel fear. He felt a strange sense of peace. It was as if he had longed for this from the very beginning. Robert ignored the screams of those around him, the men who tried to flee and begged for mercy. He simply raised his head and watched the sky beginning to show through the cracks in the tower. Embracing his inevitable death, he murmured his last words. Lionel. Chapter 22, Golden Tooth. Summary. Don't forget to leave kudos. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ned sighed as he looked at the castle before him. The past few months had been nothing short of madness. First, Robert legitimized Edric Storm, naming him his heir and placing him above his uncles. Ned wanted to bang his head against a wall at Robert's stupidity. What had Robert been thinking? A future civil war between true heirs yet to be born and Edric Baratheon was a real possibility. Legitimizing a royal bastard could lead to countless disastrous outcomes. There was even the example of the Black Fyress. The moment Ned heard the news, he resolved to give Robert a good beating. But now, he couldn't do that because Robert was dead. When Ned learned of Robert's death, a wave of grief washed over him. He reminisced about their old times together and mourned his friend. The strange thing was how Robert had died. Wildfire. What was wildfire doing in the hands of the High Sparrow? It was a substance banned from use and trade, and the amount of wildfire sufficient to blow up the Kingspire Tower would have undoubtedly attracted attention. Wildfire was so volatile that it could explode under intense sunlight, it was that unstable. Transporting it would have required extreme care. And what made it worse? The people didn't see the Kingspire disaster as a wildfire explosion but as divine justice. Robert, in his attack on Harrenhal, hadn't only killed soldiers but also the priests in the castle. The High Sparrow and his priests were about to be excommunicated by the most devout council, but Jon Arryn delayed the process and chose negotiation. When Robert killed the High Sparrow and his priests, these men hadn't been excommunicated yet, they were still official members of the Faith of the Seven. Thus, Robert's attack on Harrenhal was seen as an attack on the faith itself, a brutal massacre of the priests. The High Septon was far from pleased. Shortly after Robert's death, Edric Baratheon was proclaimed king at Storm's End, and Ned received a letter asking him to come and swear loyalty. Ned shook his head in disbelief. Do they know I'm in the middle of a war? I'm leading an army, I don't have time to travel for weeks, he had said. Later, Ned learned that Edric's coronation was orchestrated by his Florent relatives. It had taken place without Jon Arryn's knowledge or approval. The old man was still in Old Town at the time, having just received the news of Robert's death. When Ned received news of Robert's death, he was at Riverrun. His three-pronged attack on the Riverlands had been a resounding success, wiping out the entire Lannister army of 15,000 that had invaded the Trident in one stroke. It was a complete disaster for the Lannisters. Eddard Stark was known for devising the strategy that ended the Targaryen reign at the Battle of the Trident, and now, with minimal losses, he had secured this major victory. Needless to say, Eddard Stark was now hailed as one of the greatest military strategists in West AOC history. Compared to him, names like Randyll Tarly and Stannis Baratheon seemed insignificant. Shortly after Robert's death, Ned received a raven from Tywin Lannister. The old lion reminded Ned of the terms of Edric Baratheon's legitimization. Edric was placed behind any legitimate-born children in the line of succession, meaning Joffrey and Tommen were ahead of him. The old lion was adamant that his grandchildren carried Robert Baratheon's blood. He outright rejected the bastard claims and, of course, included a marriage proposal alongside the letter, a union between Joffrey and Sansa. Ned didn't even bother considering the proposal. In his eyes, the Lannisters were a lost cause, unworthy of investment. He didn't want to cooperate with the lion, he wanted to kill it first and then plunder its corpse. Besides, he would never agree to marry his daughter to a cat-killing, psychopathic bastard. The real disaster came later. The same letter was apparently sent to Mace Tyrell, who was at Bitterbridge at the time. The old lion also reminded Mace of the Florent's claim to the position of Reach's paramount lord. And the Fat Rose decided to accept the lion's offer. Olenna Tyrell would no doubt beat her son senseless the moment she saw him, but the deed was done, the contracts were signed. Joffrey and Margaery were engaged. 40,000 soldiers were added to the Lannister army. Meanwhile, a 30,000 strong army led by Randyll Tarly and supported by the Hightowers was backing Edric Baratheon. In short, the Reach had split into two factions, the Roses and the Foxes. The Northern and Riverlands armies under Ned's command consisted of around 45,000 men. Normally, the 20,000 strong army from the Vale under Yohn Royce would have joined them, but Jon Arryn had redirected them to the Reach to unite with the forces of the Foxes. Meanwhile, Jon had finally reached Storm's End and assumed the regency over the boy king, Edric Baratheon. The first thing the old falcon did was arrange a betrothal between Edric and Sansa. For now, Ned was holding off on considering the proposal. The Lannisters were already mobilizing the entire Westerlands army to suppress the High Sparrow rebellion. After the fiasco in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister declared a civilian conscription, increasing the army's numbers to 40,000. Ned had wiped out 15,000 of these soldiers in the Riverlands, leaving 25,000 remaining. With the Reach now aligned with King Joffrey's faction, their combined forces totaled 65,000 soldiers. Ned looked again at the scene before him. Golden Tooth. A formidable castle, it was the gateway to the west, and taking it quickly was essential for his plans. Fortunately, he had begun preparations long before Robert's death. Blow the horn 5 times to signal the attack, he ordered a soldier beside him. The soldier looked at him in surprise. One blow of the horn would have been enough to signal the army. But Ned ignored the soldier's confusion and simply waited for his command to be carried out. Some battles are won with a sword, some with a pen. And sometimes, with both. A great victory once again. You are still very young, but you have already become the architect of 3 great victories, Lord Roland Crickehall shouted, raising his glass in Ned's honor. Thank you, Lord Crickehall. I surely couldn't have succeeded without your help, Ned replied, maintaining a neutral expression. He looked around at the lords once more. Crickehall, Farman, Serret, and Lefford. Traitors of the Western Army. Thanks to their aid, Ned passed Golden Tooth without any resistance and took land from Ashmark to Case. In short, the Northern and River armies had now occupied the northern part of the Western Kingdom. Soon, they would launch an attack on Lannisport. The traitor alliance had a total of 7,000 men. Ned decided to place them on the front lines for the attack on Lannisport. Tywin Lannister probably did not expect this betrayal from his bannermen. Tywin was a man who used fear to secure the loyalty of his banners, but now this method had backfired. Very few Western lords liked Tywin, and now the Old Lion was in a precarious situation. Jon Arryn had clearly stated that the status of the Lord Paramount of the West would change after the war, and this had whetted the appetites of these ambitious Western lords. Ned looked again at the man beside him. Lord Leo Lefford. The Lefford house owned Golden Tooth, and the price they charged to open the gate had been steep. Ned had arranged for Lord Leo Lefford's only child, his daughter Alysanne Lefford, to be betrothed to Robb, making her the future Lady of Winterfell. This marriage would undoubtedly provoke the Northern bannermen, but Ned could calm them down. I would like your daughter Alysanne to set off for Winterfell at the soonest possible time, he said to Lord Lefford. That way, she can meet Robb early, and my wife Ashura can begin training her to be the Lady of Winterfell. Ashura wanted Robb to marry and have children as soon as possible. I'm sure this news will please her. With pleasure, my lord, Lord Lefford said, bowing respectfully. It is an honor for us to strengthen ties with your family. Roland Crickehall smiled contentedly. Alysanne was his granddaughter, and through this marriage, Crickehall Port would begin active and generous trade with the north. The Crickehall family would undoubtedly become wealthier. The Serret family was related to Crickehall, and the current Lord Serret had been trained as a stepson by Roland Crickehall, so there was nothing surprising about their joining the traitor alliance. And House Farman. They had no blood or marital ties to the traitor alliance, but they were among the most powerful bannermen of the West. They had their eyes on the position of Lord Paramount of the West. Ned continued to chat with the traitorous Western lords for a while longer. When Mace Tyrell learned of the betrayal of the traitors and Ned's new victory, he would surely regret supporting the Lannisters and seek a way out. No doubt, the funeral bells for House Lannister would soon begin to toll. Lord Stark, I apologize for interrupting your conversation, Jory Castle spoke, stepping forward. But someone wishes to speak with you. Who? Oberyn Martell. Ned raised an eyebrow. He had just learned that Oberyn Martell was here, but it wasn't surprising. He probably wanted to join the attack on Lannisport. After obtaining permission from the Western lords in the hall, Ned politely excused himself and moved to the neighboring room. Prince Oberyn, he nodded to the man in the room. Lord Stark, Oberyn Martell said, smiling, and embraced Ned in a friendly manner. I heard Ashura has just given birth. How is she? The Maesters say her health is good, Ned replied. For a moment, he thought of Ashura, Illyria, Sansa, and Arya. He missed them all dearly. And there was also his newly born daughter, Lytheria. Ashura had written about how sweet and cute she was in her letters. Ned was eager to see his newborn daughter. Are you here to join the Lannisport attack? Yes, that as well, Oberyn said, shrugging. But I also wanted to discuss a serious matter with you. What is it? Maker. Ned froze for a moment. He knows. How does he know? After a brief pause, the answer came to him. Ashura. Damn it. What do you want, Martell? He asked sharply. I'll be brief and cut to the chase. I know you Northerners prefer it that way, Oberyn said. We know Rhaegar and Lyanna are married, and that the marriage documents are with you. That means the child is legitimate. Declare Maker king, and marry him to Rhaenys. If Dorne, the North, and the River armies unite, Maker could become king of Westeros. If you convince Jon Arryn, the Vale will join us. Stark blood could make a man the king of Westeros. Doesn't that sound tempting? Honestly, it was tempting, but the cost of losing would be high, and it would be a risky gamble. And Rhaenys. Ashura had told him that Rhaenys was alive when they were married. Ned had personally spoken with the little girl and apologized for what had happened to her mother. "I am loyal to House Baratheon," he said firmly. Robert had done so much for the North, he could not betray his son like that. "But you've already betrayed him, haven't you?" Oberyn said mockingly. "I've sent ravens and evidence in all directions. Lord Hand and the Child King Edric will likely learn the truth within a week, and after them, it won't be long before all of Westeros knows." Ned furrowed his brow. This news getting out could put the North in serious trouble. The Martells were laying all their cards on the table and forcing the Starks into an alliance. "I'll leave you to think for a bit, but you don't have much time," Oberyn said, withdrawing. Ned's nerves were on edge as he watched the self-satisfied man leave the room with ease, after causing trouble for House Stark. He decided to ruin that smug mood. "His name is not Maker." "What?" Oberyn looked at Ned in surprise. "The name isn't Maker," Ned repeated. "Maker was the Targaryen name given by Ashura and me. Rhaegar named the child Aegon." Oberyn froze for a moment, then realized what Ned had meant. His face twisted with anger, and he quickly left the room, likely to find a few Lannister soldiers to kill. As Ned watched him leave, he couldn't help but smile. Now his mood was restored. Still, as he watched the view outside the window, he couldn't help but mutter a curse to himself. "Damn you, Ashura, you really fucked me over." The decision he would make next week would be critical for the future of House Stark. Ned prayed that he would make the right choice. Notes: Ned Stark's triple assault to the south can be considered an advanced version of what Robb did. I'm not very knowledgeable about military tactics, and there may be logical errors while writing the fanfic, so I kindly ask for your patience in this regard. Chapter 23, Dragonstone. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Edran gazed at Dragonstone with admiration. The sharp lines of the dark stone made the castle look more like the arms of a dragon than a fort. The dragon statues adorning the outer walls seemed to stare at visitors with lifelike eyes. The sound of wind mixed with the waves crashing against the rocks, echoing like an ancient whisper. This place was now his. These stone walls and dragon statues were the rightful claim of his bloodline. "And no one will take it from me," he added with determination, a dark smile crossing his face. "Your Majesty." At that moment, Miles Toyne appeared behind him, interrupting Edran's quiet reverie. "The people of Dragonstone and the nobles of Crownland are gathered in the square as you requested." Edran nodded and silently followed Miles. As they walked, the sound of the stone-paved road echoed in his ears. Dragon motifs adorned the surrounding stone walls, but Edran didn't pause, continuing forward. When they reached the square, a black stone pedestal in the center caught his attention. It was surrounded by nobles and common folk. Edran noticed the fluttering banners of Crownland houses and recognized a few. Rhaegar's black battle hammers, Barrowman's blue swordfish, Valerian's seahorse, and Celtigar's red crab were all clearly displayed. Each house was here, showcasing its power. With resolve, Edran climbed the pedestal's steps. The murmurs of the crowd gradually faded, and all eyes turned toward him. Nobles and common folk alike fell silent as if waiting for this moment. Edran's dark cloak fluttered lightly in the breeze as his eyes scanned the crowd. After gathering everyone's attention, he began to speak in a deep, confident voice. "I am Edran Blackfyr. My mother, Serra Blackfyr, of the noble Blackfyr house, my father, Maegor Brightflame, son of Aerion Targaryen, the true heir to the throne, whose birthright was stolen by the Great Council." With Edran's words, most of the crowd remained silent, but several nobles shifted uncomfortably. Aerion Targaryen, known for drinking wildfire and burning himself in his madness, was a figure marked by delusion. His son, Maegor Brightflame, was Aerion's legitimate son. By the rules of inheritance, he should have been the king. However, the Great Council had completely ignored the infant. The fact that Maegor's father had been known for his madness and the name Maegor itself were likely factors in this disregard. If Edran was truly Maegor Brightflame's son, then he was the legitimate heir to the throne. Maegor, after Aerion's death and his madness, had been ignored by the Great Council, but they had not officially declared him a bastard or removed him from the line of succession. This left the possibility for Maegor's descendants, like Idran, to claim the throne once more. Idran scanned the crowd before taking another step forward, his voice full of determination and anger. "Our time, our era has come," he shouted. "We, the Black Phyres, deserve this throne, because true rulership runs through our veins. This has always been the truth. Westeros denied this truth, and since the reign of King Daeron II, this land has known nothing but strife and war." Idran stepped further, feeling a growing power with each word. "They wore down the people, spilled blood, and used deceit to claim the Iron Throne. But we, the Black Phyres, have the strength to cast out the false rulers. This is our right, and we will take what is ours." The crowd began to grow more and more excited. Many nobles nodded, raising their hands in support. Banners from various houses fluttered as the crowd slowly began to gather around Idran. Some common folk clapped and cheered, chanting his name. "Black Phyre! Black Phyre!" Many felt that a new era was about to begin. Feeling the power of the crowd, Idran strengthened his words, filling the square with a fiery energy. The light in the eyes of everyone around him grew brighter. "The Black Phyres are returning. Our time is now. No one will stop the rightful heirs from reclaiming what is ours. This land will belong to those who deserve it." At that moment, soldiers from the Golden Company, along with commanders, began chanting louder in support. Descendants of the nobles who had fled with Igor Bittersteel during the first Black Phyre rebellion joined in. Idran's words ignited a fire in the hearts of these former rebels' descendants. The proud heirs of old, their chests puffed with pride, raised their hands and shouted, "Black Phyre! Black Phyre!" The excitement reached its peak, and the crowd had become a tidal wave of support. Idran looked at these new supporters, and his power grew even stronger. "We are the true heirs of the old times," he proclaimed. "No one can deny the rightful heirs. The time has come, the Black Phyres are returning." The crowd, growing more and more excited, filled the square with their thunderous chants. "Black Phyre! Black Phyre!" The echoes of their voices seemed as though they would last until sunset. "I am proud of you, my nephew." "That was a magnificent speech," the plump, bald man said, embracing Idran. "Your mother and father would be proud too." "I could never have gotten this far without you, Daemon Uncle," Idran replied gratefully. "I did what had to be done for our family's legacy," he said. "By the way, you don't need to call me Daemon anymore. That name died a long time ago. Everyone calls me Varys now, and that is what you should call me." "Very well, Lord Varys," Idran said, respecting his uncle's request. "Please join me in the Council of War." "It would be a great honor for me, Your Majesty," Varys replied, walking behind his nephew. When they reached the doors of the War Council, Idran entered without hesitation. He sat at the head of the long table, while Varys took his place at his right. The table was covered in maps and plans, with the council members silently watching them. "Let's discuss the details of the King's Landing assault." "What is the plan?" "Your Majesty, we will depart in 2 weeks, and..." began Harry Strickland to report. 2 weeks is far too long," Varys cut him off. "We must start the invasion within a week at the latest." Idran and the others at the council exchanged surprised glances. "You said all the Westerosi armies are currently fighting in the West and Reach," Harry Strickland reminded him. "Why the rush? Are you familiar with the Jon Snow scandal?" It was impossible not to know. All of Westeros had been shaken by the news. Eddard Stark, a man known for his honor and integrity, had lied and deceived everyone. He had hidden his nephew, the son of Lyanna, as his own. But no sane person blamed him. Given what had happened to Elia and her children, it made sense and was morally right for Lord Stark to protect his nephew. "Of course, everyone knows, but what does it have to do with this?" Will Cole asked. "The news reached us after Lord Stark finished the Lannisport occupation," Varys explained. Lord Stark was immediately called to King's Landing by Jon Arryn, and he responded to the summons. They will likely negotiate the situation and decide to send young Jon Snow to the Night's Watch. Some of the people in the room's eyes lit up as they understood Varys' meaning, but Will, clearly, did not. "I still don't see the connection. The realm and the faith would never accept a second marriage," that child will be considered a bastard in every sense. It's not about Jon Snow, you fool, Miles Tywin interrupted. Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn are in King's Landing, so if we take the city, we can capture them too. Edran's eyes sparkled at the opportunity before him. Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn were two of the key figures of the rebellion, people Edran deeply respected and admired. Both lords were unaware of the Black Phaeres' return. Varys had kept all the news from them, meaning they would be caught unprepared. If Edran could capture them at the start of the war, it would be a huge victory. If he could convince either of them to join him, it would be a major breakthrough in his quest for the throne. All right, Edran said, standing immediately and focusing on the map to strategize. How many soldiers do we have? With the support of the Crown Lands Lords, we have 17,000, reported the excited Henry Strickland. Good, Lord Varys said that Janos Slynt, the commander of the Gold Cloaks, is a bribed man. We've made the necessary arrangements to have him open the gates for us, Edran said, pointing to roads on the map with his fingers. Additionally, the man he sent, Alpha, knows the tunnels of King's Landing and will allow us to infiltrate quietly. I'm telling everyone here, Lord Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn are not to be harmed. If you make a mistake in this, I will have you executed, no matter your rank. Understood. The council members nodded solemnly, they knew how crucial this was. Good, Edran said, turning his attention back to the map. With my 7,000 men, we'll take King's Landing. Miles Tywin's 4,000 will quickly take Harrenhal. I believe there's only a small garrison there. Even though the Kingspire Tower had been destroyed, the castle still stood, and strategically it was in a very valuable position. Laswell Peak's 4,000 will take Bitterbridge and monitor the road to the Reach. He studied the map again. Finally, Harry Strickland's 2,000 elite soldiers will assault the tunnels under Storm's End and attempt to take the castle. King Edric Baratheon's current position is unknown, but he's most likely still there. I want that boy alive with me. The same goes for his uncles, Stannis and Renly. Edran then turned to Henry Strickland. What is the situation with the fleet? As you know, the Golden Company has its own fleet, and the Crown Lands Lords are supporting us with theirs. Thanks to Lord Varys, we've managed to win over most of the royal fleet, the man reported proudly. The only fleet that can challenge us now is Redwyne, but they are far away on the west coast. The plan seems flawless, Laswell Peak said. But we can't conquer Westeros with only 17,000 men. We need allies. We will find allies, Edran said. I sent a messenger to House Tyrell. After we complete the conquest, they will deliver a letter to Olenna Tyrell. I've never heard of this before, Varys said. What did you offer them in return? Nothing, Edran said with a smile. I just wrote that they could retain the title of Lord Paramount of the Reach. There was no need to offer House Tyrell anything. The Tyrells were already in a desperate situation. Their allies, the Lannisters, had been largely crushed by Eddard Stark. On top of that, they were being pressured by the army of Randil Tarly. By the end of this war, they would lose their house's title, if not their very existence. They had no other choice but to ally with Edran. Moreover, many of the Stormlords were killed during the Kingspire disaster, Edran continued. The current lords are the second or third children of their families, still young and lacking experience in governance. Their positions are unstable. If we capture Storm's End, I will offer them help and try to sway them to our side. You're still unmarried, Your Majesty, Laswell Peak said. If we arrange a suitable marriage, we could secure more allies. Perhaps with Orlys Martell. I'm not discussing marriage at the moment, Edran replied firmly. I already have someone in mind. His words created a brief silence in the council room, but Varys watched him closely. He didn't ask more, but the subtle smile on his face indicated he hadn't forgotten about it. All right, Edran said, refocusing on the map. We've settled the plans. Each of you knows your tasks. We won't stop until we take the throne back. Now go and tell your men to prepare. We leave in a week. The council members began to rise and leave the room. Edran leaned back, watching the crowd disperse, while Varys stayed behind. Your Majesty, Varys said softly. You can win this war, but there's one thing you must remember. The throne is not just about winning, it's also about keeping it. Idran remained silent for a moment in response to Varys' words. Finally, with a gleam in his violet eyes, he answered, "I will take the throne, Lord Varys. And once I have it, it will belong to me and my heirs forever." Varys nodded, bowing his head in respect. "Of course, it will be that way, Your Majesty." Idran rose and walked to the large window of the room. His eyes lingered on the horizon, where the throne he sought and the steps that would change the fate of Westeros lay ahead. This war would likely be one of the bloodiest in Westeros history, but Idran would be at the heart of it. My father fled, Idran thought, recalling his father Maegor, who had been too fearful of assassins to claim the Targaryen name, instead adopting his grandfather Aerion's epithet, Bright Flame, as his surname. But I will not flee. Idran looked out the window, the endless blue of the sea stretching before him. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore, mixed with the salty air carried by the wind, whispered to him the echoes of both the past and the future. The horizon, where the sea met the sky, was unclear, but somewhere out there, in that endless space, a power lay waiting. He found himself standing at the crossroads of both his past and the future he was writing. Here, in this land and before this sea, everything was in his hands. For a moment, everything went silent, only the sound of the sea could be heard. He stared at the dance of the waves, silently watching for a few minutes. This kingdom is my right, and it will be mine. Notes. The character Maegor Bright Flame mentioned in this chapter is a canon character. In other words, the account of the Great Council mentioned above is not a story I made up. Chapter 24, Fair Market. Notes. The place where Jaime and Cersei were caught is known as the Golden Room, which is why I've named the incident in Chapter 19 the Golden Room Scandal. Keep that in mind while reading. Don't forget to read the end notes of the chapter, this time, they are particularly important. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Ashura had been on the verge of losing her mind with worry over the past few months. First came the scandal of the Gold Room, which forced Ned to gather his army and march south. While she was concerned for her husband, she wasn't overly frightened. After all, the Lannisters were fighting against the combined strength of the other 6 kingdoms. She only hoped Ned would end the war swiftly and return home to meet their newborn daughter, Lytheria. Then, more serious news arrived. The death of Robert Baratheon, whom Ashura had never liked despite his friendship with Ned, was among them. She had never forgiven the king for turning a blind eye to the massacre of Elia Martell and her children. There was also news of the new king, Edric Baratheon, the Tyrells siding with the Lannisters, and countless other developments. However, reports of Ned's significant victories soon followed. Ashura was proud of her husband, confident that despite the war dragging on, he would emerge victorious and return home. As if all these events weren't enough, Jon Snow's true parentage was revealed to the entire world. Ashura felt deeply grateful to the Martells for their help in removing Catelyn Tully. Without their assistance, she would not have been married to Ned. She also harbored a sincere desire for her late friend Elia's vengeance and wished to see Elia's daughter seated upon the Iron Throne. For this reason, before leaving Sunspear, Ashura had disclosed Maker's identity to the Martell brothers. However, she hadn't anticipated that they would use the truth in this way. What were Doran and Oberyn thinking? Had Robert Baratheon still been alive, this revelation might have swayed the North and Riverlands toward supporting a Targaryen restoration. Everyone knew how the Stag King would have reacted upon learning the truth. If the Martells were lucky, Robert might even have made a move that would fracture the Stag Alliance. But Robert was dead, and his son Edric was too young to rule, leaving Jon Arryn as his regent. The old Falcon was not a man prone to rash actions. While the revelation created trouble for the Starks, it hadn't severed their ties to the Stag Alliance. Poor Jon Snow's world shattered upon learning the truth. He had always believed his parents were a magnificent couple who met at a tournament and fell in love. But the horrifying reality struck him like a hammer: he was the child of a disgraceful union that had sparked a war. Even though he had no part in the events, Jon couldn't help but blame himself. He had already started talking about joining the Night's Watch. Moreover, he had grown distant from Ashura, addressing her only as Lady Stark. Every time she tried to speak with him about the matter, he avoided her with unwavering determination. His relationships with his siblings also suffered. He kept his distance from them and refused to share any thoughts or feelings. Ashura felt a deep sense of shame for the boy's pain. Perhaps Ned had been right, perhaps they should never have lied and claimed that she was his mother. Despite all this, there didn't seem to be any immediate danger. Ned had traveled to King's Landing to negotiate. The talks would likely conclude with Maker being sent to the Night's Watch, a fate the boy had begun requesting, and a betrothal between Sansa and Edric Baratheon. For the first time, Ashura began to worry about Sansa's future. The girl was entirely detached from reality, living in a world of princesses and knights. If she went south to become a queen, the politics of King's Landing would devour her. Ashura knew that Ned would not provide Sansa with the guidance she needed, so she took it upon herself to prepare the girl. She shared the tragic story of her friend Elia and her children, emphasizing that life was not a fairy tale. Then, she began educating Sansa on the complexities of royal politics. The true disaster that stunned the entire realm came shortly afterward. The Black Fires had returned. In a series of masterful military maneuvers, they captured King's Landing, Dragonstone, Bitterbridge, Harrenhal, and Storm's End. Stannis Baratheon was killed defending Storm's End, Renly was taken captive, and the young King Edric narrowly escaped because he happened to be elsewhere. Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn's fates remained uncertain. The small folk had begun calling this conflict the War of the Three Bastards. Upon hearing the news, Ashura left all the Stark children in Winterfell and travelled south. She knew this impulsive act was unbefitting of a Lady Stark. She was expected to remain strong and present a resolute front to the Northern Lords, something she tried her best to do. However, her deteriorating health didn't go unnoticed. Worry and fear consumed her. Each day she remained in the dark about her husband's fate. She grew paler, weaker, and more ill. 2 months later, word arrived that Jon Arryn had been killed during the invasion. King Edran Blackfyr expressed his condolences, claiming the incident had been a tragic mistake. He returned Jon Arryn's body to his family with full honors, along with the heads of the 3 men responsible for his death. But Eddard's fate remained uncertain. It had been 5 months since King's Landing was taken, yet the Blackfyr side refused to provide any explanation. Before departing for King's Landing, Ned had left command of the army to the Blackfish Sir Brynden Tully. Brynden left 10,000 men to besiege Casterly Rock and starve the garrison, while the remaining 32,000 soldiers regrouped at Fairmarket, preparing for a coordinated offensive. Brynden Tully could not guarantee victory in this campaign. To reach King's Landing, they would first have to lay siege to Harrenhal, a move that would result in significant military losses. Following that, they would need to besiege King's Landing itself. Unless they could find a way to open the gates, as Tywin Lannister had once done, the siege could drag on for an extended period. The city's walls were strong, and taking King's Landing would not be an easy feat. They awaited the Vale army to retake Bitterbridge and join them for the siege, but Bitterbridge, too, was a fortress not easily reclaimed. That attack would also come at a high cost in lives. Eddard's situation. Many nobles and soldiers believed that Lord Stark was dead. If the Blackfyres had him in their custody, they would have already announced it and attempted to use his capture to their advantage. Their refusal to even declare his death seemed to stem from a desire to delay the Northern and Riverland armies from immediately mobilizing and launching an assault on King's Landing. Ashura rejected and tried to ignore all the rumors and speculation. If Ned were truly dead, Ashura knew she could never live with the fact that it was because of her. The raging rivers of the Trident, offering a swift death to those willing to plunge into their currents, seemed more tempting with each passing day. And now, Ashura was running toward the command tent of the encampment. She had heard that Blackfyr envoys had arrived at Fairmarket for negotiations, a truth others had tried to keep from her. But Ashura had learned during her time in the Red Keep to listen to the servants if she wanted to hear the fastest news. She knew that, as a woman, she had no place in such military discussions, yet she had to be there. She had to be present, to look the Blackfyr envoy in the eyes, and to ask the question burning in her soul. Ignoring the soldiers calling after her, begging her to stop, and the guards at the tent entrance attempting to block her way, Ashura pushed forward with determined strides. As she entered the tent, she could feel every pair of eyes turn toward her, their attention fixed on her intrusion, but she did not care. Her gaze locked onto the elderly man she believed to be the Blackfyr envoy. The emblem on his chest, 3 black castles, marked him as a member of House Peak, leading her to assume he was Lasswell Peak. Fixing her eyes firmly on him, she demanded with unwavering resolve. "Where is my husband?" Laswell Peake appeared stunned by her sudden entry and question. For a moment, he stood motionless, seemingly unsure of how to respond. "Where is my husband?" Ashura repeated. "Is Ned dead?" "If your heart tells you so," Laswell Peake finally replied after a tense silence, "then trust your heart, my lady." The seven reveal themselves in strange ways. In that moment, Ashura understood the truth. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed to the ground. She offered no resistance as soldiers gently lifted her and led her outside. She hung limply, like a puppet with its strings cut. Ned was dead. He truly was gone. That night, Ashura danced with Ned at Harrenhal in her dreams. She did not want to wake, knowing that when she did, he would be lost to her forever. Notes. This time, I'll give an early spoiler. Normally, I would leave the plot open-ended and wait for readers to discuss it, building more interaction. However, I didn't do that this time because I recently discovered that some readers quickly jumped to conclusions and left the series after finding a development they didn't like. So, I'm writing it here. No, Eddard Stark did not die. Catelyn, throughout the books, constantly brought trouble to House Stark with her impulsive actions. I thought it would be fair if Ashura created a similar problem. I've started a new fanfic, or rather, I've begun publishing some ideas as one-shot chapters, written purely for fun or with the potential of turning them into full fanfics. If you think this chapter deserves its own fanfic, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Link: https://archiveoforon.org/works/62282194. If you want to stay updated on my new works, don't forget to subscribe to my profile for email notifications. Similarly, if you enjoy this fanfic, please leave kudos, recommend it to your friends, and subscribe to be notified about new chapters. You've probably noticed, but I'm publishing almost daily chapters. Lastly, I have a small request for fanfic writers or those considering writing: always include relationship tags for pairings in your story. Yes, I understand it might be a bit of a spoiler, but think of readers who want to find, say, Ned/Cersei stories but can't because you didn't add the tag. Or, on the flip side, readers who are uncomfortable with Ned/Cersei content. If you don't want to receive hate from readers, it's worth being mindful of this. Remember, you don't need two characters to be in love to add a tag. Even if they just had a sexual encounter, it's necessary to include the tag. Also, if there are any tags you think I should add to the fanfic, don't hesitate to mention them in the comments. Wishing everyone a great time on the forums. Chapter 25, Maiden Vault. Chapter text. The maid respectfully informed Ned, "His Majesty invites you to join him for tea." Ned sighed as he closed the book he was reading. Rising from his seat, he followed the maid down the corridor, noting her Valyrian beauty. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. Valyrians, who once ruled kingdoms, now served as palace maids. For the past 6 months, Ned had been confined to the Maiden Vault within the Red Keep. He wasn't mistreated, in fact, he was treated as a distinguished guest. Isozzi servants attended to his every need without hesitation, fulfilling his requests promptly. After a while, Ned realized these servants were former slaves. All were women, of appropriate age, attractive, and some wore revealing attire without any shame. Though they were technically free, their demeanor and treatment mirrored that of slaves. Ned had heard of such bed slaves in places like Pentos. He was certain that if he wanted to sleep with one of them, he would face no resistance. In fact, some servants attempted to seduce him, but Ned was not the kind of man to fall for such tactics. He had only ever been with 2 women in his life and felt no need to increase that number. There were also guards who constantly observed him. However, they never interfered with him as long as he didn't attempt to escape or venture beyond the allowed boundaries. He was even permitted to train in the yard and walk in the gardens. Before Jon Arryn's body was sent to the Eyrie, Ned was allowed a final farewell to the Old Falcon. During that time, Edran Blackfyr personally executed the men responsible for Jon Arryn's murder. Though reluctant, Ned had to respect the act. It adhered to the laws of the First Men. Yet, one thing was missing. No matter how often Ned asked, he couldn't learn what was happening outside the palace. The only exception was the weekly tea sessions with King Idran. Once, he declined the invitation, just to see if the gods would force him. To his surprise, nothing happened. Attendance wasn't mandatory, but it was the only way to gather information about the outside world. Lord Stark Idran greeted with a nod from his comfortable chair. The young king seemed to be in good spirits, though that was always the case whenever Ned saw him. Without saying a word, Ned sat in the chair opposite him. Ned had been meeting with this young man every week for the past few months and had come to know him to some extent. First of all, the man was handsome, with a striking charisma that was immediately noticeable upon first sight. However, his charm was not like Rhaegar's. Rhaegar could be described as beautiful rather than handsome, with more feminine features, whereas Idran was the complete opposite. He was the embodiment of a masculine man. Rhaegar was always melancholic, as if crushed under an immense burden. Idran, on the other hand, seemed as though he always had everything figured out, projecting the image of a man who could overcome any obstacle in his path. Rhaegar was a man to be helped, Idran was a man to be followed. Ned saw shades of Robert in Idran, but the differences were stark. Idran was far more intelligent, cunning, manipulative when necessary, and unquestionably ambitious. Tea. Idran followed his usual routine, gesturing to the teapot and offering Ned a cup. Ned rarely accepted. It wasn't personal, he just didn't like tea. No, thank you, he replied politely. But this time, Idran ignored his refusal and placed a cup in front of him. The action caused Ned to raise an eyebrow. Idran had never forced tea on him before. Why was this time different? He's trying to unsettle me, Ned realized. He wants to show me I can't say no to him. Lemon cake? Idran asked, pointing to the cloche on the table. Clearly, you're going to make me take something. Fine, Ned replied. Idran lifted the cloche, revealing an empty plate. Ah, my apologies, it seems they forgot to bring it, he said with mock embarrassment. Bastard. Something was off. Ned could feel it in the air. What do you want, Your Majesty? He asked in a flat tone. Just a conversation, as always, Idran replied innocently. I've withdrawn my forces from Harrenhal and Bitterbridge, consolidating them in King's Landing. Ned couldn't hide his surprise at the statement. Idran was preparing for war. Abandoning strategically critical locations like Harrenhal and Bitterbridge seemed unbelievably foolish. If there was one thing Ned had learned in the past months, it was that Idran was no fool. You're counting on my presence, aren't you? Ned asked. You think the enemy won't attack King's Landing because I'm your prisoner? Idran chuckled at the suggestion. They don't know you're alive. Ned shot to his feet. You told them I was dead. Ashura will lose her mind. I told them nothing, Idran corrected. But yes, they believe you're dead. Why would you do that? You could have used me as a bargaining chip. The Northern, Riverland, and Vale armies, Idran replied. I want them to gather around King's Landing without hesitation. No matter how much Ned thought about it, he couldn't make sense of it. Why? Because they'll soon be my army, Idran said matter-of-factly. 3 kingdoms joining the Black Fires will be an unprecedented move. It will create an opportunity to strike the foxes from behind. Ned sat back down. You think I'll join your side and convince them to follow suit? You're overly confident, Blackfyr. Why would I join you? Don't even think of threatening me with execution, I'm a soldier. I live ready to die. I'd never execute you. That would ruin everything, Idran replied firmly. First, I plan to marry your daughter, Sansa, and make her my queen. Sansa is only 9 years old. I'll wait until she's 15, Idran shrugged. You'd wait 5 years to marry her. What if you die in the meantime? Maena and Daemon, Idran explained. My bastard sons. They are currently 6 and 4 years old, safely hidden in Essos. If something happens to me, they'll be legitimized and take my throne. If I marry Sansa and have a legitimate son, they'll remain bastards forever. You're very confident in yourself, and this war, Ned said. In this world, nothing is certain except winter. I agree, Idran acknowledged. Let's say you refused to bend the knee and heroically sacrificed yourself, he said, making a theatrical gesture with his hands. Brynden Tully comes with his army, avenges you, and drives the Black Fires away, though believe me, the cost of that would be immense. And then what? The defeated Golden Company returns to Essos, hides my sons Maynor and Demon, trains them, and prepares for yet another Black Fire invasion. Do you know how many Black Fire rebellions there have been? Honestly, I stopped counting after the third. Ned couldn't deny the truth in Idran's words. Even if I accepted, the people wouldn't, Ned said. They are furious over the High Sparrow's death. They won't tolerate a sinful, Targaryen-like house ruling Westeros. I'll speak with the High Septon, Idran replied. The High Septon won't be able to control them this time, Ned argued. He will. He owes me for the wildfire in Harrenhal. I'll also issue decrees outlawing incest and second marriages for the Black Fire line. Ned stared at the king in shock. The wildfire at Harrenhal had been provided by the Black Fires. If true, this meant they had been planning this invasion for a long time, crafting a meticulous strategy. Outlawing incest, meanwhile, would distinguish them from the Targaryens and appease the people. It was a clever move. This might actually work, Ned admitted. But it's not enough for me to accept your offer. I have one more promise, Idran said, holding up two fingers. None of the concessions Robert gave to the North will be revoked while I'm king, except for a few minor exceptions. Robert's concessions, particularly the tax breaks, had greatly accelerated the North's prosperity. However, many nobles, including Jon Arryn, believed they were overly generous and pressured Robert to revoke them. Robert had stubbornly refused, but Ned knew these benefits wouldn't last under the next king. Idran's promise, however, extended this advantage significantly. It was a generous offer. I acknowledge your offer is generous, Ned said, rising from his seat. But I need time to think. Take all the time you need, you'll accept in the end, Idran said smugly. You won't have a choice. Ned turned and prepared to leave without responding. Wait, Idran said abruptly. There's one more matter. What now? Ned asked, visibly irritated. Lady Ashura is devastated, said King Idran. After her last meeting with Laswell Peake, despite the old man's vague response, she concluded that you were dead. She deteriorated so quickly that even Lord Peake's heart bled for her. She came to me, begging me to reveal that you were alive. For the love of the old gods, Ashura. Ned's heart filled with dread. Please, let nothing terrible happen. I can't reveal you're alive, it would jeopardize my plans. But I'm not entirely heartless, Idran continued. I've ordered paper and ink to be left in your room. Write a letter to your wife, telling her you're alive and to keep it secret. Mention something only the two of you would know, so she can trust its authenticity. But we'll review it before it's sent. Ned nodded in sincere gratitude and hurried to his chambers to write the letter. The maid respectfully informed Ned, His Majesty invites you to join him for tea. Ned nodded to the maid and began to follow her. He had been thinking about Idran's offer for the past week and was leaning toward acceptance, but he hoped to push the terms of the bargain. If possible, he wanted Sisterton to be recorded as part of the Northern Territories. Lord Stark, Idran said. This time, he was not sitting, he stood. There was no tea on the table, not even a table, and this meeting was no longer secret, with people everywhere. Lords, commanders, servants. I have a gift for you, the king said in a generous tone. Just as Ned was about to say something, he heard a scream behind him. A woman, whom he did not immediately recognize, ran toward him and embraced him so swiftly and warmly that Ned couldn't even respond. The woman buried her face in his neck, inhaling his scent, and began to cry. Ashura, Ned realized in shock. 7 hells, she has truly fallen. I didn't even recognize her when I first saw her. Ned, in the same way, hugged the woman tightly, murmuring comforting words in her ear. Then, to express his thanks, he turned to Idran. The young king was sitting there, wearing a generous expression, but when Ned looked into his eyes, he saw a glint of cunning, and at that moment, he understood exactly what was happening. The bastard tricked me. He used the letter I wrote to lure Ashura here. Ashura is now a prisoner with me, and if I refuse the offer, both of us will be executed. He turned our meeting into a public spectacle to show all of Westeros how generous he is. Ned looked back at the man before him. The young man was wearing red Black Fire armor, Even though he had only just entered the Game of Thrones, he was turning it with great skill. He was definitely someone who should not be made an enemy. For the first time in his life, Ned was afraid of his rival. Chapter 26, Red Keep. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Benjen tightly embraced his brother, having believed for the past few months that he was dead. He had concluded that the Black Fyress refusal to provide any explanation regarding Lord Stark's unknown status could only mean the worst. But it turned out that the young King Edran was far more cunning than he seemed. "Brother! Thank the gods!" Benjen exclaimed with gratitude. "All right, you're going to choke me," his brother replied, laughing. "Come, Benjen, we have things to discuss, and time is limited." Ashura only allowed a private meeting for 10 minutes. Benjen chuckled at the remark. Lady Stark, since reuniting with her husband, rarely allowed him out of their chambers or away from her side. Still, Benjen was happy for his sister-in-law. When he saw her earlier, he noticed she was much healthier than before. "Brother, Benjen hesitated, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect her. I was too focused on keeping the Northern Army united." "It doesn't matter. I fell into the same trap," Ned replied dismissively. They both sat at the table. "Tell me, what's the state of the Northern Army?" "The lie you told wasn't well received," Brother Benjen said honestly. "The reputation and trustworthiness of House Stark have certainly taken a hit, but most lords remain generally loyal. However," he fidgeted nervously, "there were rumors that you intended to support Maker as king, which caused significant unrest within the army. Additionally, there has been fierce debate about Lyanna and Rhaegar's relationship. Some claim Lyanna willingly eloped, causing her father's, her brothers, and thousands of Northerners' deaths. They say she refused to marry Robert Baratheon because of his affairs with whores but was willing to become the Silver Prince's second wife. They are calling her the She-Wolf Whore. I've punished those spreading such rumors immediately, but they continue to whisper in secret." "I understand." Ned sighed deeply. "What about the North? Have the harvester deliveries been completed?" Benjen looked at his brother in surprise. Even in captivity, Ned was concerned with the North's agricultural rotation plan. Since Ashura headed south, there hasn't been anyone left in Winterfell to oversee such matters, so the harvesters are currently stored. Additionally, the new grain silos you ordered to be built and the upgrades to existing ones have been delayed due to the war. "That could be a serious issue," Ned said frankly. "The summer has lasted unusually long in recent years, which means the coming winter could be disastrous. We must end this war immediately and prepare for winter in the north. Oats, rye, barley, wheat, beets, and rice, all of these must become widespread crops in the north before winter comes." Benjen knew how ambitious his brother was about the agricultural rotation plan, but even now. "Well, he knows better than I do," Benjen thought as he shifted his focus to the main issue. "What about the war, brother? Are we joining the Black Fyress side?" "I'm not sure," Ned admitted honestly. "If I stubbornly refuse to bend the knee, it will likely result in Ashura's and my execution, leaving you as the only adult Stark in the north. Some northern and southern lords will try to claim all the investments I made over the years to enrich the north. Robb is still a child, so you'll need to guide him until he comes of age." Benjen recoiled at the thought. He saw himself as a capable lord but knew he wasn't a leader like his brother. He was more of a supportive figure, akin to Kevan Lannister, and he was honest with himself about that. As the third son, he had never been groomed for leadership. "Then it seems you have no choice but to accept," he said reluctantly. "I'm inclined to accept," Ned stated plainly. "But there are two non-negotiable conditions. If they are not met, I will never bend the knee." Benjen immediately straightened in his seat, focusing on his brother. "What are these conditions?" First, Ned explained, Sansa will be placed at the very bottom of Winterfell's line of succession. This will make it nearly impossible for Edran and Sansa's children to claim rights to Winterfell. Benjen nodded in agreement. Sansa was not a capable leader for the North, and keeping her as Robb's heir posed a significant risk to the region's future. They barely knew the Black Fyress and couldn't take such a gamble. "And the second condition?" "I recently had the chance to speak with King Edran," Ned said uneasily. He told me the wildfire that caused the Kingspire disaster was supplied by his side. Are you certain? Benjen asked. Could he be bluffing? I don't think so, Ned replied. Everything that has happened since the war began seems meticulously planned. The Goldroom scandal might have been a coincidence, but the High Sparrow uprising was not. For a zealot-led rebellion, it was too organized, and the houses that joined the rebellion didn't wait even a day before aligning with the Black Fires. I'm not sure, Benjen said. The High Sparrow despised Targaryens, and the Black Fires are essentially a branch of them. According to King Edran, the High Sparrow was not a Black Fire supporter, Ned explained. The one who detonated the bomb was Bonifer Hasty. He was in love with the late Queen Rulla and sought to avenge her. Then they must have been preparing for this for a long time, Benjen speculated. I trust the Northern Lords, but among the Riverlands and Vale Lords, there may be Black Fire traitors waiting to stab us in the back during the war. That's possible, Ned agreed. But you're missing the main point. I told you the wildfire used during the Kingspire disaster was supplied by the Black Fires. Do you understand what that means? Benjen thought for a moment before his eyes widened in realization. The Black Fires have wildfire. They likely possess the knowledge to produce it, and, given how they transported it to Harrenhal unnoticed, they also have safe and efficient methods of transportation. Exactly, Ned confirmed. My second condition relates to this. King Edran must issue decrees outright banning the use of wildfire and have the High Septon declare it accursed and accursed substance. He must proclaim that anyone who uses it will be damned. If what you're saying is true, wildfire is a critical weapon for the Black Fire family. King Edran won't easily accept this proposal. That's why I said this condition is non-negotiable, Ned said firmly. Even if they execute Ashura and me, I will never kneel unless these two conditions are met. While I'm gone, you must lead the North with utmost caution, brother. If you launch an attack on King's Landing, remember they possess wildfire. Keep the troops spread out, and have the Crannog men archers ready in the rear to target any wildfire bombers immediately. Don't worry, brother, Benjen assured him. No matter what, I will avenge you. Don't burden yourself with that too much, Ned said, laughing as he leaned back. King Edran may have cornered me, but Tywin Lannister has cornered King Edran just as effectively. If I don't support them, the Black Fires have no chance of winning this war. Benjen knew this statement was true. Tywin Lannister, besieged at Casterly Rock, had made a move no one expected, completely upending the board. He had renounced all claims to the throne for his grandchildren, announcing that Joffrey and Tommen would join the Night's Watch and that Cersei and Myrcella would become Silent Sisters. But Tywin's actions didn't stop there. He had negotiated with the armies of both the Rose and the Fox, facilitating an alliance between them. Edric Baratheon would marry Margaery, with Tywin serving as Hand of the King. In short, the Rose and the Fox armies had merged, giving the Baratheons an army of 83,000. I can't believe the old lion gave up the Lannister legacy, Benjen remarked. He didn't have much choice, Ned explained. He tried to negotiate and make peace with the Black Fires, but King Edran completely ignored him. As a new king with a new dynasty, he needs to prove himself militarily, otherwise, his reign won't be taken seriously. He paused for a moment. The king chose the Lannisters as a rival to crush. The Tyrells seemed on the verge of defecting to the Black Fire side, so House Lannister's existence was in jeopardy. The old lion gave up the Lannister legacy to save his house. If you kneel before Edran, their 83,000 soldiers will face our 79,000. This will be a war of unprecedented scale, Ned. The likes of it have never been seen in history, Benjen mused. It truly will be, Ned said, pausing briefly before rising and walking to the window to gaze at the view of King's Landing. I fear what the future may hold, brother. The fate of House Stark may hang by a thread. Benjen found this comment hard to dismiss as an exaggerated absurdity, so he said nothing, focusing instead on the war. What about the Dornish? He finally asked. Their allegiance could make a real difference in the war. I doubt they'll join the war, Ned said. They would never side with the Lannisters, and King Edran, as a Black Fire, holds them in contempt. He despises the Targaryens even more. He won't negotiate with them in any capacity. What will happen to Maker? Benjen asked after a moment's pause. Most likely the Night's Watch, Ned replied. There's nothing more I can do about it. I promised Lionel, but I can't protect my nephew any longer. If I insist on this, the security of the North will be in danger. Poor child, Benjen thought. Well. Benjen stood. I need to think about this and make plans. I should take my leave now. Eddard Stark gave his brother one last tight hug. I trust you, Benjen. Protect the North. And I trust you, Benjen replied. Take care of my sister-in-law. While you're at it, have another child. The Stark pack needs new wolves. Ned feigned mock anger as he told his brother to get lost, while Benjen walked away laughing. We pledge our loyalty to the Blackfyr House of Dragonstone, Benjen said at the same time as his brother, kneeling before the Blackfyr king. We entrust our hearth and our crops to you. Our swords and spears are at your command. Grant mercy to the weak, help to the helpless, and justice to all. We will never abandon you. Fuck, Benjen swore inwardly. We are about to start the greatest war in history. I swear on earth and water. Thousands of people will die. I swear on bronze and iron. The Battle of the Trident will seem like a mere skirmish in comparison. I swear by ice and fire. I hope history forgives us. Notes. We're approaching the end of a long journey. I plan to conclude my fanfic, For a Stronger North, in Chapter 30. Throughout this story, we've witnessed the struggles, challenges, and triumphs of the characters together. As we move towards the finale, my goal is to craft every detail carefully and deliver a satisfying conclusion. This has been an unforgettable process for me, and I am deeply grateful for the interest you've shown in my story. The final chapter will be coming soon. Don't forget to leave kudos. Chapter 27, Edran the Valiant Blackfyr. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Edran calculated that the stag army should be near Golden Grove now while looking at the map. Then the battle would most likely take place in Tumbleton. What do you think, my king? Lord Stark asked with an unreadable expression. Edran looked at Eddard Stark, who was sitting in the honor seat beside him. During the months he had held the man captive, they had met nearly every week, and Edran couldn't deny that he had developed a certain level of admiration for his good father. War, politics, statecraft, this man had expertise and experience in all of them. He rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone around him listened closely, and the advice he offered was almost worth its weight in gold. Edran had spent a lot of time thinking about how he would draw Eddard Stark to his side while the man was his prisoner. Eventually, with support from his uncle Varys, he managed to come up with a strategy. Eddard Stark was born a soldier, and threats like death or torture didn't frighten him. However, there were things he valued more than his life: the North, his children, his wife. Edran acknowledged that the alliance he had formed with the Starks had begun under somewhat unpleasant circumstances, but he was genuinely eager to build a good relationship with them. There was no better way to secure the future for himself and his children than a Stark marriage. Drawing the Starks to his side, though the price he paid was hard to swallow, had been worth it. Not only did he gain an army that would make him king, but he had also acquired a brilliant commander and advisor in Eddard Stark. The very presence of the man lifted the morale of the army, and despite their fatigue from war, they were confident they would win. I believe the battle will take place here, Edran said, pointing at Tumbleton on the map. That's a reasonable deduction, Eddard Stark acknowledged. What strategy do you plan to follow? Edran realized that the man was testing him. He had been doing this in nearly every meeting they had had, observing him, trying to assess his character. Edran smiled to himself. Putting a king to the test in this way might be considered insolence by some, but Edran actually enjoyed these challenges, and after passing each one, he made significant progress. Tumbleton's eastern region is known for its mountainous terrain, Edran said. If I place archers there, I could gain an advantage over the stag army. Yes, the advantage of archers is quite valuable, Lord Stark said. But it alone won't win you the war. We're facing the combined armies of the Reach and the West, and these forces are known for using heavily armored soldiers. The Stormlands army is renowned for its ability to make forward attacks and break through enemy defenses, Edran suggested. We could open a gap in the stag army and then let the archers take advantage of it. The entire Stormlands army isn't with you. Some of them are still supporting Edric Baratheon, Eddard Stark reminded him. And they don't have a leader like Robert Baratheon. I wouldn't bet on such a claim. What about the North's army? Edran asked. What difference can you make? This question caused Lord Stark to pause and think for a moment. We have Cranogmen archers, they are very accurate, but their numbers are few. The Rills and Dustin cavalry are of good quality, but they are not as good as the Vale's armored cavalry. The Mandaelis have a good quality knightly force, especially their armored infantry, but facing Lannister level quality would be difficult for them. The Umbers are excellent soldiers for the front lines, their shield walls are incredible, nearly impossible to breach, but I wouldn't claim they are as impressive as the Dornish shield walls. The Boltons are great soldiers for the front lines as well. They have experience in breaking shield walls. Very few men can look at the banner of a skin peeler and not be frightened, but even they aren't as good at breaking through a wall as the Baratheon army. He looked at Edran again. In short, the North's army is good in nearly every aspect, but it's not the best at any of them. Edran looked at his good father in surprise. The man clearly had an excellent understanding of West AOC armies, though such insight was to be expected from such a renowned war commander. What do you recommend? Edran finally asked. The armies we face, Lord Stark asked. Tyrell, Florent, and Lannister. What do these three have in common? Edran thought for a moment. These armies have fought against each other. Yes, correct, Eddard Stark confirmed. These armies were fighting, killing each other, and plundering each other's lands just a few months ago. Wouldn't it be absurd if they suddenly became allies? Edran couldn't deny the logic of this. The Stag Alliance did appear quite fragile, but especially the Lannister and Tyrell forces would be highly motivated. If they lost this war, at best, they would lose their Lord Paramount titles, at worst, their houses would be destroyed. Tywin Lannister and Olenna Tyrell both knew this very well, and they would play all their cards. Compared to the Stag army, the Blackfyr alliance was made up of men who had fought together, not against each other. Edran had the full armies of the North, the Riverlands, and the Vale, along with part of the Stormlands. These kingdoms had come together in their last campaign to overthrow the 300-year-old Targaryen dynasty. And the Blackfyr army. If his ancestor Daemon Blackfyr hadn't been treacherously ambushed by Brynden Rivers, he would have certainly won that war, overthrown the Targaryens, and saved Westeros from the Mad Kings who would follow in the years to come. Edran was absolutely certain of this. You want to exploit their lack of alliance, Edran said. How do we do that? The Stag army is mostly made up of heavily armored troops, so they are very slow, much slower than us, Eddard Stark said, placing his hand on a specific part of the map. You should march the army here. Edran looked at the location his good father had indicated on the map in surprise. Highgarden. Yes, the Tyrell stronghold, Eddard Stark confirmed. When Mace Tyrell learns the army is marching towards his house, he'll try to intervene and get in the way. Tywin Lannister, on the other hand, will seize the opportunity and attempt to conquer King's Landing while we're away. King's Landing is the seat of power in the kingdom. You want me to give it to the Stag army? King's Landing will be a temporary loss, Eddard Stark shrugged. If you win the war, it will become the seat of the Blackfyr house forever. Edran paused for a moment, tapping his fingers on the table as he thought. What's your plan? When we march our army towards Highgarden, Eddard Stark explained, the Stag army will have only two options. First, they can try to intervene. If they choose this path, a battle will take place near Rosa Road, a battle that strategically favors us. The Mandaya River will be right behind us, and you can station the Blackfyr fleet there, so if we need to retreat, they'll provide us with a clear route. What if they choose the second option? Edran asked. What if they attack King's Landing? Most likely, they'll take the city, Eddard Stark shrugged. He picked up the symbols on the map, lion, flower, and fox carvings, and placed them on King's Landing. Then he put the Blackfyr symbol on Highgarden. Now tell me, Eddard Stark looked at Edran carefully. Where is Tywin Lannister? At King's Landing. Where is Mace Tyrell? At King's Landing. And where are their lands? Eddard Stark pointed to the west and reach on the map. Our hands, Edran's eyes lit up with admiration. On a silver platter. They'll be in our hands, and we can conquer and plunder as much as we want, and while we do that, the loyalty of the Reach and the West nobles at King's Landing will be greatly shaken. Exactly. Already, a few Western noble houses have betrayed the Lannisters. And the Tyrells don't have the full support of the Reach, his good father said. While we plunder their lands, they'll be trapped in King's Landing. And with us blocking the flow of crops from the Reach into the city, they'll have to deal with a starving population. They could attack the Reach again, or they might turn towards the Riverlands, Idran speculated. But attacking the Riverlands would drag the war out and provoke the nobles who want to free their own lands. If they attack to regain the Reach, we can wait in a favorable position and create an opportunity for ourselves. And by that time, several Reach and Western houses will be at our door, offering alliance and a chance to strike from behind the Stag army. Idran looked at his good father once more with admiration. This is a brilliant plan, he finally said. Let's present it at the War Council tomorrow. I'm sure they'll approve it. Eddard Stark accepted the compliment with a small nod of his head. The War Council had approved the plan. Tomorrow, under the leadership of Lord John Mudd, a vanguard of 5,000 men would set out for Bitterbridge. The entire army was expected to be on the move within a week, as speed was crucial to gaining the strategic position for the battle. Most of the soldiers were experienced warriors, and they were aware that the upcoming battle would be one of the largest in West AOC history. From the most ordinary soldier to the greatest commander, everyone was eager to prove themselves and etch their names in history. Of course, Idran would lead the army, with Eddard Stark always by his side for advice. Idran was excited, his spirits high. After winning such a grand battle, no one would dare question the Blackfyr family's right to rule the country. He would achieve a victory like the one Aegon the Conqueror had won at the Field of Fire, but with one major difference: Idran didn't have a dragon to cheat with, and since he had promised Eddard Stark, wildfire would be off the table during the war. He would win this war with nothing but his own intellect. His soldiers had already begun calling him the Valiant. Idran looked at his good father, who was speaking to his good mother, Ashura, trying to calm her down. The woman was soon to set sail for White Harbor and return to the north. She had already started showing signs of pregnancy. She loved her husband, that was certain. And the man loved her as well, but he was paying the price for it. What do you think? His friend Limond Peak asked. Idran said, I hope Sansa Stark is as productive in having children as her stepmother. Ha, is that what you're thinking? Limond laughed mockingly. Did you know I'm going to marry their daughter? The girl is incredibly beautiful, I am the luckiest man in the world. Their daughters. Idran looked at his friend in horror. Lytheria Stark is still a baby. I'm not talking about her, Limond said. I'm talking about Illyria Dane. She's actually the daughter of this pair, don't tell me you didn't know. Ah, Idran sighed in relief, remembering the information his uncle Varys had given him earlier. He could see the strategic advantages of this marriage. After Idran won the war, he decided to grant the Peak family vast lands along with the title of the new Lord Paramount of the Reach. The Peaks had been active supporters of the Blackfyr since the First Rebellion. They had even managed to kill a Targaryen king. However, the cost of their support for the Blackfyr had been very heavy for the Peaks. The Peaks had lost many of their relatives in the Blackfyr rebellions, along with much of their land. In the last battle, Limond's older brother, Pykewood Peak, had been killed, and his friend Limond had become the new heir to his father's lands. While Idran was willing to reward House Peak generously, he had kept it quiet. Yet his good father, Eddard Stark, had probably foreseen this move. He was securing his daughter's future position as Lady of Highgarden, a deal that would benefit both sides and, of course, Idran was not against a marriage that would draw the Starks and the Danes more firmly into the Blackfyr alliance. Must be nice to be loved like that, Limond said with a certain bitterness. Idran smirked. Love is not what I need. I need a lady who does her queenly duties and gives me healthy heirs. I hope Sansa Stark can manage that. Really? Limond asked. Come on, mate, don't be so cold. Everyone wants to be loved. Unnecessary, Idran repeated, looking at his friend. Love would kill me. Notes. I am not an expert in war strategy, so if there is a strategic mistake in the narrative, please don't focus on it too much. The Targaryen king killed by the Peaks, Maekar Targaryen. Chapter 28, Battle of the Bloody Plain. Summary. I really put a lot of effort into this chapter, I hope you like it. I have added some photos with visual descriptions in the chapter to help you better understand this war. I hope the photos are visible to everyone. I would like to remind you that I am not an expert in war strategies, so there may be some logical errors. I see some readers complaining, "Hey buddy, this was supposed to be a Stark story, not the rise of Blackfyr." Please be patient, I believe this story will reach an ending you'll enjoy. As you know, I'm wrapping things up in chapter 30 and will start working on a new series. I'm sharing my ideas for the new fanfic in my What If series. Link. https://archive.org/works/6228219/4/chapters/159345586. I will be adding 2 new one-shots to this series soon. I'm considering publishing one of them as my new fanfic. I'll make my decision based on readers' opinions, so stay tuned up arrow. Don't forget to subscribe to me as a user if you want to be notified when a new chapter or fanfic is released. Chapter text. The knights bearing the sigil of House Arryn took their positions in waves, numbering in the thousands, while they were supported by the Stark infantry soldiers following behind them. The two allied houses had fought together in this position before, so they were accustomed to each other's tactics. They took their assigned positions on a slight rise overlooking the enemy's defenses. The armor of the man beside him was forged from black steel, decorated with red and silver embroidery. A 3-headed dragon embossment glowed on the breastplate, and the shoulder plates resembled dragon wings. His helm was designed like the head of a dragon, with eye holes glowing like embers. It was truly a magnificent set of armor. Anyone watching from afar would have no doubt that the one wearing it was Edran Blackfyr. "Stand tall," Ned commanded the armored man. "Right now, people think you're King Edran. If you show any sign of fear, we could lose the battle. If that happens, I'll send your corpse to the Boltons." The man with the violet eyes briefly shifted with fear, but quickly returned to his brave, kingly posture and nodded at Ned in acknowledgement. He was playing his role well. In the distance, Ned could see the Mandaeally Knights advancing south at a relaxed pace. Dawn had broken, and the sun was beginning to rise mercilessly. There was a light breeze, but no rain, and Ned was truly grateful for this. If it had rained, the battle would have become a miserable ordeal for his army. The area they were in was already partially swampy, but Ned had positioned his soldiers in a more favorable spot. The Stag's army would have to cross the swamp-sweat areas before launching their assault, and most of them were heavily armored. Their feet would become cold and damp as they waded through the water, leaving them feeling ill and demoralized even before the battle began. He looked at the banners of the enemy army approaching and saw the golden rose of House Tyrell. However, the banners of House Tarly and House Hightower were missing. It was clear that Randyll Tarly and Baelor Hightower had seen through the trap this position was laying for them. "The Tyrells are keeping us occupied while they circle around the forest and try to attack us from behind, catching us off guard," Ned speculated. A simple yet effective strategy. If Ned had wildfire in his possession, he would have set the forest ablaze while the enemy soldiers were inside. But there was no such hope. Wildfire being completely banned, a taboo material. If Ned had used it, his already fragile reputation and honorable image would have been shattered beyond repair. Still, this didn't mean Ned wouldn't use the forest to his advantage. He had already prepared a few surprises. Half a mile away, Mace Tyrell sat atop his magnificent horse, with the main body of his army at its center. Beneath his green cloak, he wore an ornate suit of armor adorned with a golden rose. The morning sun shone on his helm, decorated with leaf motifs, giving him the appearance of a figure straight out of a knight's tale. For the old god's sake, does he not realize we are at war? Ned wondered in disbelief. Making himself so conspicuous will only bring about his death. "Keep 5 Cranogmen archers ready," he instructed Howland Reed, who stood beside him. "If the opportunity arises during the battle, they should take a shot at this fool. I'm sure finding his position won't be difficult." Ned heard the sound of the war horn and saw 5,000 enemy soldiers charging swiftly from the left flank. He easily recognized the commander leading them. Gregor Clegane. Ned had to admit that this man was the right choice. Had he been the one to initiate the first assault, he would have used the Boltons. He's heading toward the Umbers, Ned thought with amusement. I guess this time he's chosen a rival more his size. Great Jon will have a lot of fun. Ned sent instructions to Lord Deacon Iron Smith, who was in charge of the RYLLS cavalry, to circle around the enemy's vanguard from behind. As he gave these orders, the Umber forces were already beginning to form a shield wall against the enemy. If House Cricklewood hadn't betrayed the Lannisters, they would have moved alongside the vanguard, and the Umber shield wall would have posed a serious threat. The Cricklewood sigil wasn't a wild boar for no reason. House Cricklewood had a certain reputation for breaking through shield walls. As the enemy continued to charge toward the Umbers at full speed, the archers of House Blackwood, House Hunter, and House Templeton were unleashing a rain of arrows. Ned saw a few enemy soldiers fall, but there were no significant casualties. Finally, Clegane slammed into the Umber shield wall. The noise was so loud that it was likely heard even in Winterfell. Soon after, Iron Smith's cavalry launched a counter-attack from behind Clegane. Ned hoped Lord Deacon Iron Smith wouldn't make the foolish mistake of directly attacking Gregor Clegane, as doing so would certainly result in his death. Boy, he instructed the squire beside him. Tell Lord Iron Smith not to attack Clegane directly and not to send his cavalry into the enemy ranks. They should shake up the enemy and prevent them from escaping while the archers finish their work. The squire nodded quickly and hurried off. Just then, the Tyrell infantry began to advance. An intimidating force of around 20,000 infantry was charging toward the center of Ned's army. This won't do, Ned thought. I need more time. Order the Bolton, Bracken, Piper, and Vance forces to advance and engage, he commanded. 10,000 men should be enough. I want them to hold them off for as long as possible. As Ned's orders were quickly relayed, the battlefield was descending into chaos. The Umbers had clashed with Gregor Clegane's vanguard in a deadly battle. Great shields and massive axes collided, the screams of the dying and the sharp sound of metal ringing through the air. Iron Smith's cavalry had begun to encircle the enemy, but Gregor Clegane was still charging forward like a wrecking machine atop his giant horse. As the Bolton, Bracken, Piper, and Vance forces advanced, a bloody clash with the Tyrell infantry was imminent. Ned knew these forces wouldn't last long, but their sole purpose was to buy time. If the enemy's attention could be distracted long enough, it would be enough. Hightower and Tarly are inside the forest, Howland reported. How many? Ned asked with an expressionless face. About 16,000. Ned nodded in acknowledgement. If 16,000 men had suddenly emerged and attacked from behind, it could have been a serious problem, but Ned had already ensured that the enemy forces wouldn't be able to move through the forest easily. For the Northerners, calling the forest folk was hardly an inaccurate term. Nearly all of the North was covered in vast forests, and they were the North's greatest source of livelihood. Almost all Northerners, including women, learned to hunt, set traps, and skin animals from a young age. Ned had already prepared for a possible attack from the forest. Since the beginning of the battle, Glover, Forrester, Mormont, and the mountain tribesmen had been positioned in a scattered manner throughout the forest. The forest was filled with hunting traps. The forest was an ideal place for setting traps. First, it wasn't that large. From the hill where Ned stood, he could see both the start and the end of the forest. Secondly, despite the forest's small size, it was quite dense, filled with trees and greenery. In short, it was the perfect place to lay an ambush for an army. Still, Ned didn't expect the forces he had positioned within the forest to destroy the enemy. They didn't need to do that. Ned wasn't after a victory in this battle, he only needed to buy time. The battle continued like this for about an hour. To keep occupying the Tyrell forces, Ned sent reinforcements from Hornwood, Slate, and Flint. A few enemy soldiers occasionally emerged from the forest, attempting to attack from behind, but they posed little problem since the Cranogmen archers at the rear quickly intervened. Ned now thought that Edran must have arrived by now. A servant rushed towards Ned, shouting, "My lord! My lord! A disaster! This is a disaster!" Ned glared at the foolish servant, who was shouting loud enough to announce the disaster to the entire army. What happened? The combined Lannister and Florent army has appeared right behind us. They've taken our ships at the Mandaya River with a surprise attack, and now they are heading this way. Ned stared at the boy in disbelief. The Lannister and Florent combined army. What were they doing here? According to the intelligence Ned had received, the Tyrells had planned to march to Highgarden after learning that the Blackfyr army was advancing, but Tywin Lannister had refused, insisting on invading King's Landing. As a result, the Stag army had been divided into two parts, with the Florents joining the Lannisters. The Blackfyr army celebrated upon hearing the news. With the armies split, it wouldn't be much of an issue to destroy the Tyrell and Lannister forces piece by piece. But Ned found this news suspicious. Tywin Lannister wasn't a fool, he must have known that splitting the army would lead to certain death. Why had he made such a decision? Still, sharing his suspicions at that moment seemed unnecessary. Ned quickly devised a new plan to defeat the approaching Tyrell forces with minimal loss. His own army would be split under the command of Edran and Ned. Edran would march toward Highgarden, while Ned would wait in an advantageous position along the Rose Road. What happened next depended on whom Mace Tyrell decided to attack. If they attacked Edran, Ned would strike the Tyrells from behind. If they attacked Ned, the reverse would apply. The reason Ned based his entire strategy on buying time was that Edran was waiting for the Blackfyr army. They hit me with my own tactic, Ned realized then. The Lannisters had likely gone to Bitterbridge, but instead of laying siege, they had followed the river downstream. With a sharp strike, they had destroyed the Blackfyr fleet waiting at the Mandaya River, and now they were coming toward him. How many soldiers? When will they arrive? What kind of troops? Ned asked the servant. About 23,000. Mostly cavalry. They'll be here in no more than 20 minutes, the servant reported. Ned quickly thought about what to do. 23,000 soldiers were more than enough to take the hill he was currently occupying, especially if they attacked from behind. There was a forest in between, but it was a narrow area, and it wouldn't cause much trouble for the Lannisters. Fleeing wasn't an option, the cavalry would catch them quickly. A surprise attack to disrupt the enemy's center. Too risky. No, what he needed to do was stick to what he was doing now. Hold the hill, buy time, and wait for Edran Blackfyr. All units on the hill, turn around. Ned started issuing commands. The infantry in the valley and the river will hold the center. Blackfish will lead the defense. All available archers will position on the hill to support them. Mandaealis cavalry will be on the right flank, Arin's cavalry on the left. The Karstarks, together with the Stark forces, will hold the center. The lords around him immediately set off to carry out their orders. The army began to move quickly, with all the units positioning themselves as fast as possible. Fortunately, the news had arrived just in time, giving them enough time to take their positions. At that moment, another horn sounded from behind. Blackfyr. The Blackfyr army has arrived, reported Rickard Karstark. Ned scanned the horizon and saw the faint fluttering of the Black Dragon banner. The Tyrell army, just like Ned had done earlier, was turning around to take up their positions. In that instant, Ned understood. It was all a matter of time now. Would the Tyrells hold longer, or would the Starks? The answer to that question would determine the fate of the battle. Who is commanding the Tyrell army? Mace Tyrell is not experienced enough to have the forces set up so quickly, Ned asked the men around him. Randil Tarly answered Yohn Royce, his expression troubled. I don't think he entered the forest with his own troops. Ned swore loudly. Just then, another horn sounded, and in the distance, Lannister and Florent cavalry appeared. Ned measured the distance in his mind. He calculated that they would begin their attack 5 minutes before the Blackfyr army struck the Tyrells. All right, gentlemen, he shouted to his soldiers. We're facing the Lannisters and Reach Screen boys, the ones we've humiliated twice before. Let's show them how real men fight. As the Lannisters surged forward, Ned's soldiers' cheers echoed across the battlefield. Just then, another horn sounded. Ned cursed under his breath as he looked around. The horn sounded again. And again. 5 times in total. Ned's blood ran cold. The horn being sounded 5 times was a tactic he'd used when giving a signal to the traitors during the capture of Golden Tooth. At that very moment, The united defensive line of the River and Vale armies, which had not yet clashed with the Lannister cavalry, began to falter. The traitor houses immediately withdrew, creating gaps in the defense and attacking their former allies to expand those gaps. Ned quickly counted the traitor houses. From the Vale, Corbray and Grafton. From the Riverlands, Mouton, Root, and Free. "Tell the loyal houses to retreat immediately and rally at the center," he shouted urgently. "Arryn and Marndale cavalry will harass the Lannisters from the side. I repeat, don't waste time fighting the traitors, fall back and regroup at the center. Blackfish will hold the Lannisters, Benjen will lead the retreat." The orders were swiftly carried out. Thank the gods, the lords under his command were experienced commanders who knew how to relay orders to their soldiers. At that moment, the Lannister assault began. As Ned had commanded, the Marndale and Arryn cavalry did their best to stall the Lannisters, while Brynden Tully fought desperately to keep them at bay. Benjen, on the other hand, was doing his utmost to pull the army back, shouting orders to the soldiers and commanders around him. A few minutes passed as Ned did his best to organize the positions. Blackfish couldn't hold the Lannister army for long. Just then, another 5 horn blasts sounded. But this time, instead of reacting with alarm, Ned smiled in relief. The horns had been sounded by the Blackfyr army. There were traitorous houses in the River and Vale armies. Why wouldn't there be in the Reach? Ned and Varys had secretly negotiated with those traitors, convincing them with various promises. Right now, the Blackfyr army seemed to be losing, but for the traitors Ned had made deals with, betraying the Stag army was their only option. As a precaution, Varys had gathered solid evidence of their treachery. If they failed to betray and caused the Blackfyr army's defeat as planned, this evidence would fall into the hands of the Stag army's leaders, and they would face incredibly harsh punishments. The traitors knew this, which is why they had no choice but to betray the Stag army. Ned turned around and briefly checked on the Tyrell army. Their defensive lines were also beginning to break. The Golden Company, showing no loss of discipline, launched their attack at full speed. The Stormlords accompanied them at the forefront. In that moment, Ned made sure to count the traitorous houses of Reach as well: Blackbar, Oakert, Caswell, and Brianel. Randyll Tarly, just like Ned had done earlier, was trying to retreat and organize a defense, but he had a significant disadvantage. Ned's commanding position on the hill was something Randyll Tarly didn't have. He was fighting on a flat plain. Ned couldn't remember what happened next. Had it been 10 minutes? 20? Maybe an hour or two? He couldn't calculate the time. The only thing he remembered was trying to hold the defense lines tight as the Lannister and Florent cavalry charged at his army with all their power and fury. After a while, he noticed infantry reinforcements arriving behind the Lannisters. They were the Stormlords supporting Edric Baratheon. When Ned saw the flag of the Buckler House on the front lines, he cursed loudly. The Buckler House was the one that had broken through Dorne's famous shield wall at the Battle of the Trident. Eventually, order broke down for both the friendly and enemy armies. They no longer cared about holding formations or military tactics, they were simply focused on killing each other in a frenzy. Ned didn't know how long he had been swinging his sword ice, but he was already covered in blood. He didn't feel tired, and if he was injured, he wasn't aware of it. His body was flooded with adrenaline. "Traitor," he suddenly heard a shout directed at him. He turned his head to see where the voice came from. It was Lyn Corbray, the famous knight who had killed Luwin Martell, a Kingsguard, in single combat at the Battle of the Trident. He was almost as skilled with a sword as Jaime Lannister, and Ned couldn't avoid fighting him. The two fought for several minutes, and anyone who tried to intervene was quickly cut down. Ned saw a Hornwood and 2 Karstark family members lying dead on the ground. If the battle continued this way, Ned would be one of them. Traitor, Lyn Corbray repeated confidently. "Robert Baratheon treated you like a brother. He gave you all the advantages and aid for the North, and yet you betrayed him." Ned couldn't deny the truth of those words. He could make excuses, but the truth was what it was. After kneeling before the Blackfyres, his honor and reputation, built over a lifetime, had been severely damaged. If he had been the Honorable Ned Stark, he would have never accepted kneeling and would have died for House Baratheon. That was the truth. Lyn Corbray made another quick move and feinted from right to left. he managed to strike a deep cut across Ned's leg. With a scream, Ned collapsed to the ground. He hadn't checked the wound yet, but he could tell with certainty that he would struggle to walk for the rest of his life. Ned, kneeling on the ground, looked up at Lyn Corbray, who was preparing to strike him down with one final blow. He accepted death calmly. He had been raised as a soldier. From childhood, he had been taught that death in battle was a possibility. For a brief moment, Ned closed his eyes. Where had he gone wrong? Perhaps, like his father, he had succumbed to the southern ambitions. Maybe he should never have gathered the army and marched south. Perhaps he should have been content with what he had and lived quietly with his family. He had wealth, achievements that would be remembered in history, a wife who loved him dearly, wonderful children. Lytheria. He had never seen her, and another child was already growing in Ashura's womb, one he would never meet. Forgive me, Ashura, Ned thought as he waited for the final strike. But it never came. When Ned opened his eyes, he saw that Lyn Corbray was lying dead on the ground, and right next to him was his friend, Howland Reed, also lifeless. For what felt like an eternity, Ned stared at the bodies of his fallen companions, lost in thought, unable to process anything. It wasn't until a hand gripped his shoulder and shook him that he snapped back to reality. It was Yohn Royce. Ned. Are you all right? Yohn shouted. Our allied forces have arrived. The entire enemy army has scattered. Tywin Lannister is dead, and the Lannister and Florent forces are retreating in panic. We've won, Ned. We won. Ned didn't say a word. He simply kept his gaze fixed on the body of Howland Reed, lying motionless on the ground. Yes, they had won. But at what cost? Chapter 29, Love Would Kill Me. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, said Maester Haldon in a sorrowful voice. The dagger struck directly into your intestines, and the poison has spread throughout your body. There is no escaping this. You don't have much time left. Thanks to the toxins I've given you, it will be a painless death. Edran took a deep breath. He had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of, but now, just as he held it in his grasp, he was losing it. Still, he wasn't too regretful. He was in bliss. The Blackfyre dynasty had finally become the rulers of Westeros, just as they were always meant to be, and they had done so with an unbelievably great victory, one that would go down in history and ensure that the name Blackfyre was remembered forever. In the midst of these thoughts, a wave of fear gripped his heart. What would happen after his death? If the Blackfyres did not sit upon the Iron Throne, all of this effort, all the blood and tears, would have been for nothing. Edran knew he had only a few hours left to live, and before he died, he had to secure the Blackfyre legacy. If he failed, the Baratheons or the Targaryens might seize the opportunity to claim the throne, or worse. The Seven Kingdoms could shatter. Eddard Stark, he muttered with difficulty. Bring Eddard Stark and Uncle Varys here. Immediately. Maester Haldon had clearly grasped Edran's intent. He nodded and swiftly left the room. Only a few minutes later, Varys entered. Your Majesty, he said with deep sorrow. Uncle. Edran tried to smile. I always thought I would outlive you. I had hoped for that as well, my nephew, Varys said in an emotional voice. You would have been a great king, truly a great king. I suppose we'll never know, Edran murmured. With time and energy running short, he saw no reason for pointless discussions. Give me that damned wine. As Edran took a deep sip from the cup handed to him, Eddard Stark entered the room. He had clearly been informed of Edran's condition, yet he displayed no emotion, keeping his stoic expression intact. Your Majesty, Lord Stark said, giving Edran a respectful nod. For a moment, Edran simply stared at Lord Stark, trying to read his emotions. Was he sad? Or was he pleased? The man revealed nothing. Everyone except Lord Stark, Lord Varys, and Maester Haldon, leave the room, he said at last. I will share my final words and orders with them. Maester Haldon will record everything. A brief murmur filled the room as people obeyed his command and began leaving. Meanwhile, Maester Haldon prepared his parchment and ink. Isn't this an unbelievably shitty situation? Edran said with a mocking grin, turning to Lord Stark. I won one of the greatest military victories in history. I defeated Barristan Selmy in single combat. I avenged my bastard great-uncle Malis. I placed House Blackfyr on the Iron Throne, as it was always meant to be. And now this. He gestured toward the wound on his stomach. All the struggles of my life, all the sacrifices of my ancestors, wasted in a single moment of carelessness and exhilaration. While I stood over Barristan Selmy's corpse, roaring in triumph, some bastard struck me from my blind spot with a poisoned dagger. And you know what's worse? I didn't even see his face. Your achievements will be remembered throughout history, Your Majesty, said Ned Stark, maintaining his stoic expression. Ah, this man never engages in conversation, does he? Edran sighed internally. Well, I suppose that's the highest praise I'll get from his lips. After I die, Edran commanded Maester Haldon, I want you to take every measurement of my body and my image. Do you remember the lighthouse on that small island in King's Landing's harbor? Tear it down and build a colossal statue of me in its place. I want it to be like the Titan of Braavos. The entire city and every ship visiting King's Landing must behold my magnificent image. As you wish, Your Majesty, said Maester Haldon, with deep respect. Very well, now about what will happen after my death. Edran coughed up a few drops of blood and, while signaling with his hand for his uncle Varys to stop trying to help him, continued speaking. It seems quite obvious that my marriage to Lady Sansa will not happen. My sons Maena and Daemon will be brought from Essos. Maena will be king, and Lord Stark will rule the kingdom as his regent until he comes of age, and Lord Stark's youngest daughter Lytheria will become queen beside Maena in the future. The War of the Three Bastards, Lord Stark said, with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. The people have been calling all this madness over the past few years the War of the Three Bastards. At the end of the war, all three bastards will be dead, but the one who sits on the throne will still be a bastard. Lord Stark laughed again at the irony of the situation. The nobility won't accept this so easily. Edran felt a surge of anger at Lord Stark referring to the Blackfyrs as bastards. Still, he couldn't muster the energy to respond, and historically, he knew this remark wasn't entirely unfounded. His ancestor and the founder of the house, Daemon Blackfyr, was a Targaryen bastard. Maena and Daemon's birth as bastards will be kept secret. Produce false documents for the so-called marriage with their mother and show the children as legitimate. Uncle Varys will handle this. Varys nodded in agreement, while a skeptical look appeared on Lord Stark's face. He was probably questioning whether the so-called marriage was real, wondering if Edran had lied to him from the beginning, but this worry was pointless. Maena and Daemon's mother had been a Lysani prostitute, a camp follower Edran had kept by his side for a few years. Edran wasn't foolish enough to marry a whore. I want the Reach to be split into 2 kingdoms. This kingdom alone can raise 70,000 soldiers, and to be honest, they are too powerful. He continued giving orders. The area around the High Towers, along with a few other lordships, will be declared a separate kingdom and will be known as Portland. The Lord Paramounts will be of the Hightower family, and their loyalty will be secured through marriage. I think Baelor Hightower should still be unmarried. He turned to Lord Stark. Your daughter Illyria will marry him and become the future Lady of Old Town. Lymond will hate me for doing this. He seemed quite infatuated with her when she visited King's Landing. The Peake family will become the new Lord Paramounts of the Reach, and Highgarden will be given to them. Marry Lymond to Sansa, their ages aren't too far apart. He looked at Lord Stark. Do you see this? I made one of your daughters a queen and gave the other 2 the titles of future Lady Paramounts. Now, stop with that damn stoic face and show some gratitude. I'm doing all of this so that after my death, you will remain loyal to House Blackfyr. The Baratheons can continue to rule the Stormlands. Edran thought that he should offer one last show of respect to the man who had overthrown the Targaryens. After all, even if the Lord Paramount title for the Stormlands were given to another house, Lord Stark would vehemently oppose it. Renly Baratheon is still imprisoned, right? Get rid of him somehow, discreetly. Stannis' only child, his daughter Shireen Baratheon, will be the future Lady of Storm's End, and she will marry my son Daemon. Another marriage to solidify Blackfyr power, Edran thought. I hope my sons don't squander these gifts, or I'll come back from the other side and deal with them personally. The Farmans will become the new Lord Paramounts of the West and will be rewarded with Lannisport. He continued, considering Crickehole House as an option, but they were related to House Stark. Edran didn't want to give the Stark family too much power. Edran amused himself by thinking about the new shape Westeros would take after his death. I believe it will have 10 kingdoms instead of 7. There was a Rain in the Golden Company, right? What was her name? Rugarain. Give her Casterly Rock. Even Lord Stark smiled at this command. The Lannister legacy was being uprooted and destroyed, and it was being given to their old enemies, the Rains. Surely, Tywin Lannister's bones would be aching in his grave. All right, I think that's everything. As for the remaining rewards and punishments, you can handle them yourselves after I'm gone. Uncle Varys, Lord Stark, you should continue to assist Maynor as long as he remains loyal. Edran said, particularly addressing Eddard Stark. Now, everyone leave. Only Lord Stark should remain. I have something to discuss with him privately. The command was carried out without any objections, and Edran was pleased. He was growing weaker and didn't have the energy to deal with people any longer. He could feel death's breath on him more and more with each passing second. You. Edran glanced at Lord Stark and didn't waste any time. You were the one who arranged for the assassin to stab me. You sent him, didn't you? Lord Stark stared at Edran for a while, and it was clear that from that moment, he felt no need to lie. Yes, he simply replied. Well, Edran sighed. To be honest, you must have had dozens of reasons for doing it. But still, I feel the need to ask. Why did you do it? Are you asking me why I did it? Eddard Stark murmured. You threatened to kill Ashura to make me kneel before you. You killed my friend Robert. You started this whole War of the Three Bastards nonsense and caused the deaths of tens of thousands. He began tapping his finger on the table. Maynor is only 6 years old, and while serving as his regent, I can use my authority to further strengthen the North. So yes, my political ambitions played a part in my decision as well. He looked at Edran again. And I know you committed fraud in the document that pushed Sansa to the bottom of the line of succession. Irregularities that could render those documents invalid. He stood up, his voice laced with anger. What was your plan, Blackfyr? After finding a way to get rid of Robb and his children, were you going to make your second son with Sansa the Lord Paramount of the North? Edran sighed. Truthfully, he had already anticipated all these reasons. I suppose today is a day for honesty, he murmured at last. Yes, you're right. That plan had crossed my mind, but I hadn't fully decided yet. Will you keep asking why I sent an assassin after you? Eddard Stark asked. No, Edran said. But I am curious, how did you do it? I was certain I had taken every precaution against assassins. Even the faceless men would have struggled to strike at me in that situation, yet your man somehow chose the perfect moment to attack and escape. Limond Peak, Lord Stark said simply. The one who stabbed you was Limond Peak. Perhaps you remember, after I bent the knee to you, my daughter Illyria visited King's Landing, and during her visit, Limond saw her. He fell for her instantly, madly in love, and begged me to let him marry her. He shrugged. I knew Limond was your friend, always at your side during the war. So, I used that. Though, I must admit, I didn't expect him to do such a thorough job. Edran cursed loudly and, in that moment, wanted to order Limond's execution. But he stopped himself. Limond was the only son and heir of his father, Lasswell. If he died, the Reach's Lord Paramount succession would become a mess, a problem that would undoubtedly cause trouble for House Blackfyr. Besides, he couldn't disregard the Peak's century-long loyalty over one lovesick fool. At least I kept him from marrying Illyria, he thought with satisfaction. He may have succeeded in killing me, but he will never have the woman he dreamed of. At that moment, Edran recalled the words he had once said to Limond. Love would kill me. Edran had never fallen in love with a woman, yet somehow, love had killed him. If he had the strength left, he might have laughed at the irony of it. Please, he murmured with his final breath. Help Maynor. Aiding House Blackfyr will serve your own interests as well. As you wish, Your Majesty, he heard Lord Stark say. As long as he continues to support House Stark, I will ensure the Black Phyre's seat on the Iron Throne remains secure. As Edran surrendered himself to death's embrace, Eddard Stark's final words echoed in his ears. After all, everything is for a stronger North. Notes. The next chapter will be the finale, and we will say goodbye to this series. Of course, I will continue writing new series, so don't forget to follow me. To see my new fanfic ideas, check out my What If series, and if you've read this far, don't forget to leave kudos. Wishing everyone a great time on the forums. Chapter 30, Grand Maester Haldan. Chapter text. In the year AC 296, the bloodiest battle in Westeros history took place in the area now known as the Bloody Plain between the Mondea River and the Rosa Road. The Stag army had 82,000 soldiers, while the Black Phyre army, with 78,000, emerged victorious. Even today, the exact number of soldiers lost by each side remains unclear, but the total death toll exceeded 64,000. The outcome of the battle was a Pyrrhic victory, and the cost was steep for both sides. This battle remains the subject of hundreds of stories and songs, and undoubtedly, it will continue to be for hundreds of years to come. In the aftermath of the war, not only did Westeros' ruling house change, but the map of Westeros itself was critically altered. 2 High Lords were brought down, 3 rose, and some noble houses with histories spanning thousands of years were erased from the annals of history. Among those who perished in the battle was this man, the victorious King Edran the Valiant Black Phyre. Undoubtedly, it was a tragic event for Westeros, as King Edran had clearly shown that he would have been a magnificent ruler. Had he lived, he could have prevented the severe damage the country suffered after the victory. At the end of the War of the Three Bastards, the total death toll exceeded 100,000, a stark indication of the significant drop in the male population of the realm. Many women were left widowed, and many children were left fatherless. All the kingdoms outside of Dorne suffered immense losses. In the aftermath of the war, most of the houses that supported the Stag army were subjected to minor or medium-scale penalties. However, the same mercy was certainly not shown to 3 houses, the Lannisters, the Tyrells, and the traitors who had betrayed the Black Phyre army. North. House Stark, winter is coming. The ruling Lord Paramount House of the North may appear to be the winning side in the war, but the losses suffered during the conflict were truly massive. A significant portion of those who returned home safely were already wounded, and the rest went mad, committed suicide, or became incapacitated due to the nightmares they endured. Lord Eddard Stark governed the country as regent until King Maenor came of age, spending his regency years tending to the country's post-war wounds. When King Maenor ascended to the throne, he inherited a relatively stable country and state hierarchy, which made his rule much easier. Today, Lord Eddard Stark has many titles. The Wise Wolf, the Traitor, or the Father of Westeros are among them. The reason for the last title is well known. Today, all current Lord Paramounts, including the King, are his descendants, his grandchildren, with these individuals even adopting titles based on their maternal lines. The generation from Lady Catelyn Tully is known as the Children of Duty, while the generation from Lady Ashera Dayne is known as the Children of Love. Under Lord Eddard Stark's rule, the North developed immensely. As a result of his efforts, the famine problems faced by the people during the winter months were largely resolved, leading to a dynamic increase in the North's population. The North alone has the capacity to raise an army of between 40,000 and 70,000 men. The roads connecting almost all of the North's lordships to Winterfell were built. Although this project was incredibly expensive, it resulted in a significant increase in transportation and trade speed in the North. Lord Stark purchased the Ramsgate port town, which was once part of the Mondaly lands, and transformed it into a fully functional port city. While it may not be as important as White Harbor, Ramsgate is known as the second largest port on the eastern coast of the North. He fortified the lands of the Gift against Wildling attacks, turning this area into the North's granary. Later, he gave the lands to his second son, Argilac, and a new branch of House Stark was founded in this region, House Daynestook. In those days known as Sea Dragon Point, commissioned the construction of an extensive port and shipyards. The purpose of this port, unlike others, was not trade, but to establish the North's naval power. Lord Stark later named this area Black Harbor, the opposite of White Harbor, and gifted it to his youngest son, Nodrik Stark, placing him in command of the North's naval forces. No one could have imagined the consequences that would arise from this decision. Nodric Stark was born in the month of the Bloody Plain battle, and according to some claims, even on the exact day it occurred, and this alone is a sign of what he would accomplish in the future. Few men in Westeros history have been as despised and respected as he was. It can easily be said that even rogue Prince Daemon Targaryen could not match him in this regard. Although Lord Eddard Stark made great contributions to the North, if asked what his greatest achievement was, everyone with sense would undoubtedly give the same answer: the Fever Channel. This canal, completed after great efforts, connected the western and eastern seas and permanently changed the trade routes of Westeros. Thanks to this canal, the travel time between Westeros' western and eastern coasts was nearly halved, and it also made it easier for trade ships coming from Essos to reach the western coast. This canal is a legendary project that not only enriched the North and House Stark, but also all the houses along the western coast. Westerland. House Farman, the Windower Steed. After the war, House Lannister was completely eradicated, and all of its holdings were confiscated. The Farmans were rewarded with Lannisport and gained the title of Lord Paramount of the West. Casterly Rock, along with its former lands in Castamere, was granted to House Rayne. The remaining Lannister lands were divided among the Crickehall, Serret, and Lefford families. As soon as Lord Benjamin Farman became Lord Paramount of the West, his first act was to marry his son and heir, Paul Farman, to the daughter of Lord Roland Crickehall. He also married one of his daughters to Lord Serret, strengthening ties with the so-called Traitors Alliance. This was undoubtedly the right move, as House Farman was not yet secure in its position as the ruling house of the Westerlands. Some remaining Lannister family members did not hesitate to scheme for the restoration of their former status and were supported by several houses, most notably House Marbrand. By forging an alliance with House Crickehall through marriage, Lord Farman also indirectly formed ties with House Stark, as the future Lady of Winterfell, Lady Alysanne Lefford, was the granddaughter of Roland Crickehall. In the years to come, the Farmans would have to endure many difficult trials to maintain their position as Lords Paramount of the Westerlands. After all, wiping out the deep-rooted influence of House Lannister, which had ruled the West for thousands of years, was no easy feat. Reach. House Peak, 3 castles, 1 will. After the war, the majority of the lands belonging to Houses Tyrell and Florent were taken from them, and both houses were reduced to the status of knightly houses. The lands of House Florent were granted to House Blackbar, while Tyrell lands were divided among other houses that had switched sides in favor of the Black Fyres during the war. House Peak, as a reward for its long-standing loyalty to the Black Fyres, was elevated to the rank of Lord Paramount of the Reach, reclaimed its former lands, and was additionally granted Highgarden. Unlike the Farmans, House Peak could not strengthen its ties with other noble houses through marriage alliances, as Lord Laswell Peak had only one child. His sole heir, Lemond Peak, was married to Lady Sansa Stark, yet the future of this union took an unfortunate turn. These misfortunes drew the wrath of Lord Eddard Stark upon House Peak, severely endangering their position as Lords Paramount of the Reach. However, House Peak's greatest advantage remained the unwavering favor of the royal family they had loyally served for so long. King Maena Blackfyre was always generous toward House Peak, and not even Lord Eddard Stark could change that. Portland. House Hightower, we light the way. Portland was a newly established Lord Paramount region, created following the war under the final orders of King Edran. The necessity of this new region and the wisdom of King Edran were later indisputably proven by the events that unfolded. House Hightower had been part of the Stag Army. Yet, instead of being punished after the war, they were rewarded with the title of Lord Paramount. This decision raised many eyebrows and led to numerous complaints. However, according to Lord Stark, there was no other suitable candidate to rule Portland. Nevertheless, House Hightower's opposition to the Blackfyre army was not forgotten. After a few hours of discussion between Lord Baelor Hightower, who had newly inherited his lordship after his father's death, and King's Regent Lord Eddard Stark, House Hightower agreed to pay off the Crown's entire debt to the Iron Bank, a sum of approximately 2 million gold dragons. Additionally, Lord Baelor solidified his loyalty to the Blackfyre alliance by marrying Lady Illyria Dane. This marriage sparked much speculation regarding Lady Illyria's possible parentage, and Lord Eddard Stark's refusal to comment on the matter only fueled the rumors further. Unlike the other two Lords Paramount, House Hightower's position was not precarious. they held their seat firmly. However, settling the crown's debt to the Iron Bank placed them under significant financial strain. Additionally, claims that the Lady of Old Town was not a legitimate child but a bastard caused Lord and Lady Hightower considerable headaches. House Hightower was a vast family, and not all its members were loyal to its leader. While House Hightower's status as Lords Paramount of Portland was secure, the same could not be said for its head, Lord Baylor Hightower. The Iron Throne. House Blackfyr, by right, by blood. King Maynor Blackfyr was personally trained in administration, politics, and military affairs by Lord Eddard Stark. Though he was neither a legendary figure like his father nor as masterful as his mentor, he successfully ruled the kingdom in peace for a long time. However, some of the mistakes he made during his reign would later cost House Blackfyr dearly, and the family's hold on the Iron Throne would face a significant test. The most defining aspect of King Maynor's reign was, without a doubt, his deep love for his wife, Lytheria Stark. His devotion reached such an extent that, according to some, it was the Queen who truly ruled the kingdom, not the king. Maynor never refused any of her requests and ensured that her desires were promptly fulfilled. Still, many did not see this as unfair, for Queen Lytheria's legendary beauty was known even in the farthest reaches of Essos. It would later become clear that her beauty was both a blessing and a curse. It is worth dedicating a separate section to King Maynor's brother, Prince Daemon Blackfyr. Prince Daemon was deeply unhappy in his marriage to Lady Sharon Baratheon, and the Stormlands lords were equally displeased that their lady had been wed to such a man. This unhappiness would later bring great trouble upon House Blackfyr. In the south, the Martells nominally accepted Blackfyr rule, but they continued to scheme for Princess Rhaenys Targaryen to claim the Iron Throne. In the west, the Iron Islands began to stir with rebellion following the return of Euron Greyjoy, and this time, they would not be defeated as easily as before. In the east, the Mad King Aerys' daughter, Daenerys Targaryen, had subdued the Dothraki and awakened the dragons. After conquering Yunkai, she turned her gaze toward Westeros, her family's lost legacy. Yet none of these threats were as great as the one in the north. The enemy of the living. Demons of snow, ice, and cold. The ancient foe. The only enemy that truly mattered. The rebellions, invasions, and calamities that began during King Maynor's reign would have consequences that lasted for generations, affecting not just Westeros but even Essos. Some cities fell, while others rose anew. This era would later be known as the Century of Blood. But that is a tale for another time. The end.